I came back from my month-long trip to Europe and pressed the button to my garage expecting to hear the familiar hum of the heavy cedar doors rolling up, revealing my pride and joy. Instead, I was met with silence and a cavernous, empty space. The concrete slab where my customized $800,000 Shelby GT500 used to sit was bare, except for a small oil stain that looked like a teardrop. I did not panic. I did not call 911. I walked into the kitchen where my son Marcus and his wife Tiffany were eating my food, drinking my wine, and living in my house. "Where is my car?" I asked calmly. Marcus did not even look up from his phone. "Dad, you cannot drive anymore. Your reflexes are shot." "I sold it," Tiffany chimed in, smiling that fake smile. "It is for your own good, Desmond. We used the money to pay off some family debts." I simply smiled, poured myself a glass of water, and said, "I understand." Then I walked to my study and texted my lawyer. They took the bait, closed the trap, they thought. They sold a car. They did not know they just sold their freedom. Before I tell you how I dismantled their lives piece by piece, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe. If you have ever had to teach an ungrateful child a lesson they will never forget. My name is Desmond King, and at 72 years old, I have built half the skyline of Chicago. I am a retired architect, and for 40 years I turned steel and glass into cathedrals of commerce. I know about structure, I know about foundations, and I know that when a foundation is rotten, you have to tear the whole building down. My son Marcus is that rotten foundation. I love him because he is my blood, but I do not like him. He is 32 years old and has never worked a hard day in his life. He thinks money is something that flows from a tap, and I am the faucet. I had been away for 4 weeks strictly for a medical checkup in Switzerland. I did not tell them that I told them I was going on a sightseeing tour. I wanted them to think I was just an old man looking at mountains. In reality, my doctor gave me a clean bill of health. My heart is strong, my mind is sharp, and my reflexes are better than men, half my age. But to Marcus and Tiffany, I am just a walking inheritance. Check, waiting to be cashed. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, gripping the handle of my vintage leather suitcase. My house is a masterpiece of modern design, open concept, floor-to-ceiling windows, Italian marble floors. It was silent except for the clinking of silverware. Marcus was eating a steak, a Wagyu steak from my private freezer. He was wearing a silk robe that I am pretty sure belonged to me. Tiffany was sitting across from him, scrolling through Instagram, a glass of my vintage Bordeaux in her hand. I looked at them and I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was not anger. It was clarity. "Where is Eleanor?" I asked again, my voice steady. Eleanor was the name of the car, a 1967 Shelby GT500 Pure. American muscle restored to perfection. It was silver with black racing stripes. It had 700 horsepower and an exhaust note that sounded like God clearing his throat. It was appraised at $800,000, but to me it was priceless. It was the car I bought the day I signed my first skyscraper contract. Marcus finally looked up. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, acting as if my presence was an interruption to his meal. "Dad, you are back early," he said. "No hug, no hello, just disappointment." "I asked you a question, Marcus. Where is the car?" Marcus sighed, putting his fork down with a clatter. "I told you, Dad. I sold it." "You sold it," I repeated, stepping into the room. "You sold a car that is titled in my name without my permission." "It is not safe for you to drive a beast like that anymore," Marcus said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone people use with toddlers and the elderly. "You are 72, Dad. Your eyesight is fading. Your reaction time is slowing down. If you hit the gas too hard on that thing, you could kill someone. We did it to protect you. We," Tiffany added, looking up with wide, innocent eyes, giving a performance that would not have made the cut in a high school play. "We were so worried about you, Desmond. Every time you took that car out, we sat by the phone waiting for the police to call. It was too much stress for the family." I looked at Tiffany. She was wearing a necklace I had never seen before, a diamond choker that caught the light from the chandelier. It looked heavy, expensive, brand new, and I suppose this protection came with a price tag, I said, looking at the diamonds. Tiffany touched her neck instinctively, flushing slightly. "This," she stammered. "Marcus gave this to me. It was an early anniversary gift." I looked at the table. Next to Marcus's plate sat a key fob. It was not the key to my Shelby. It was a modern key, glossy and black with a German logo on it, and that I asked, pointing to the key. Marcus snatched the key off the table, slipping it into his pocket. That is nothing. Just a lease I needed. Something reliable to get to job interviews. Job interviews, I almost laughed. Marcus had not been to a job interview since he was 25. He was a professional gambler, a loser who chased bad bets with my money. Who did you buy the car from, Marcus? I asked. I did not buy it, Marcus said quickly. I sold it to a private collector, a guy named Russo. He paid cash. Quick deal, clean break. How much? 300,000, Marcus said, shrugging like it was pocket change. My heart stopped. 300,000 for a car worth 800,000. He had not just sold it, he had given it away. He had sold a masterpiece for the price of a painting, just to get quick cash. You sold my car for a fraction of its value, I said, my voice dropping an octave. It was cash. Dad. Marcus snapped, standing up, aggressive, now defensive. Cash in hand. No paperwork. No waiting. We needed the liquidity. We needed the liquidity, I asked. Or you needed to pay off a bookie. Marcus's face went red. Don't start with that. Dad, this is about your safety. You should be thanking us. We took a burden off your hands. Now you can relax. Hire a driver. Be a proper retired gentleman. I looked at my son standing there in my robe, eating my food, driving a car bought with the proceeds of my stolen property. I looked at his wife wearing diamonds, bought with the theft of my joy. They did not see a father standing there. They saw an obstacle. They saw a senile old man who could be bullied and gaslit. I took a deep breath, controlling the urge to throw the table through the window. I am an architect. I do not destroy things with a sledgehammer. I dismantle them, bolt by bolt. I see, I said, my face relaxing into a mask of resignation. You are probably right, Marcus. I have been feeling a bit tired lately. Maybe the car was too much for me. Marcus blinked, surprised by my sudden capitulation. He looked at Tiffany. She smiled triumphant. Exactly, Desmond, Tiffany said, standing up and walking over to pat my arm. Her touch felt like ice. We just want you to be safe and happy. We put the rest of the money in a safe place for you, for your future care. My future care, I repeated. Yes, of course. That is very thoughtful of you. I picked up my suitcase. I am going to my study, I said. I need to sit down. The flight was long. Take your time, Dad, Marcus said, sitting back down, picking up his fork. The steak is great, by the way. You should have some. I walked out of the kitchen down the long hallway lined with the awards I had won over a lifetime of hard work. I walked into my study and locked the door. The study was my sanctuary. Walls of mahogany books regarding structural engineering and blueprints of the buildings that defined my legacy. I walked over to the large oak desk and sat down. I did not turn on the main light. I turned on the small brass lamp, creating a pool of yellow light on the leather surface. I opened the bottom drawer and pressed a hidden button underneath. The panel slid open, revealing a control pad. I typed in my code. A monitor on the wall flickered to life, revealing a grid of camera feeds. I am an architect, but I am also a paranoid man growing up in a neighborhood where you had to watch your back. I had cameras installed in every room of this house, hidden in the smoke detectors in the molding, in the eyes of the statues. I rewound the footage to 2 days ago. I watched Marcus and Tiffany in the garage. I saw a flatbed truck pull up. A man in a leather jacket got out. Russo, I assumed I watched Marcus hand over the keys to the Shelby. I saw him sign a document on the hood of the car. It was a title transfer. I zoomed in on the signature. He did not sign Marcus King. He signed Desmond King. He forged my signature. He committed a felony right there in my garage under the lens of a 4K camera. I watched Russo hand him a duffel bag. Marcus unzipped it, showing stacks of $100 bills. He laughed. He high-fived Tiffany. They kissed right over the hood of the car they were stealing from me. Then I fast-forwarded to yesterday. I saw them in the living room counting the money. 300 large, Marcus said on the recording. We are rich, baby. First things first, Tiffany said. Let's go shopping. I need that necklace from Cartier, and you need that Porsche you have been looking at. And we need to pay off Vinny before he breaks your legs. And the rest, Marcus asked. The rest goes into the account, Tiffany said. We need to hire that doctor. Dr. Stein, we need to get him to declare the old man incompetent. Once we have the guardianship, we get the house, we get the bank accounts, we get everything. I sat back in my chair, the light from the monitor reflecting in my eyes. They were not just stealing a car, they were planning a coup. They were planning to take my life away, to lock me in a home and strip mine, my legacy. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was not for the car. It was for the little boy I used to hold on my shoulders, the little boy who used to draw buildings with crayons and say he wanted to be like Daddy. That boy was dead. He was replaced by this monster. I wiped the tear away. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed a number I knew by heart. Harrison, I said when the voice answered. Desmond, you are back. How was the trip? The trip was fine, Harrison. But we have a situation at home. What kind of situation? A structural failure, I said. Protocol 7. There was a silence on the line. Harrison was my lawyer, but he was also my oldest friend. We had fought in Vietnam together. He knew what Protocol 7 meant. It meant total scorched earth. Are you sure? Des Harrison asked quietly. It is, Marcus. I looked at the freeze frame on the monitor, Marcus laughing, holding the bag of cash. He forged my signature. Harrison. He sold Eleanor. And they are planning to put me under a conservatorship. They want to take it all. I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper. Understood, Harrison said. Do you want me to call the police? No, I said, my voice hard as steel. Not yet. The police are a blunt instrument. I need a scalpel. I want them to think they are winning. I want them to spend that money. I want them to commit to the lie. I leaned forward, looking at the screen. Start phase 1, I said. Call the private investigator. I need everything on this, Dr. Stein and Harrison. Yes, Des. Find out where Russo took the car. I want to know if it is still in the state. On it, Harrison said. Stay safe, Des. Do not let them know. You know. I hung up. I looked at the monitor one last time at the image of my son betraying me. I turned off the screen. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn of my estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the grass. You want to play the game, Marcus? I whispered into the empty room. You want to treat me like a senile old man? Fine, I will be the old man. But remember one thing, son. I built this house, and I know exactly how to bring it down on top of you. Dinner in the King household used to be a sacred time, a time for discussion, for debate, for the sharing of ideas between a father and his son. But tonight, the dining room felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided, and the defendant was the only one who didn't know he was on trial. We sat at the long mahogany table, the one I had commissioned from an artisan in Italy 20 years ago. The surface was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the crystal chandelier above, reflecting the lies sitting across from me. Marcus poured a glass of my vintage Cabernet Sauvignon with a hand that was a little too steady, a little too casual for a man who had just committed grand larceny. He filled my glass, then his own, then Tiffany's. The wine glugged softly, a rich, dark sound in the quiet room. Tiffany was still fingering the diamond necklace at her throat, the stones catching the light, sending little prisms of deceit dancing across the walls. So, Dad, Marcus began cutting into his steak. With vigorous strokes, we should talk about the logistics of the sale. I know you are upset about the car, but you have to understand the financial wisdom behind it. Financial wisdom, I repeated, taking a sip of the wine. It tasted metallic on my tongue, like biting into a coin. Please enlighten me, son. Enlighten me on the wisdom of selling a appreciating asset for 30 cents on the dollar. Marcus exchanged a glance with Tiffany. It was a quick, darting look, a signal between conspirators. It wasn't just about the cash, Dad, Marcus said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. It was about Allocatlin. We took the $300,000 and we opened a specialized trust fund for you, the Golden Years Healthcare Fund. It is a high-yield account designed to cover any medical expenses you might have in the future, nursing care, physical therapy, prescriptions. It is all secure, totally locked down for your benefit. I looked at him over the rim of my glass. He was lying effortlessly. The lie rolled off his tongue like he had rehearsed it in the mirror. A trust fund, I said, setting the glass down gently. And where is the paperwork for this trust fund? Marcus, I would like to review the terms, the interest rate, the withdrawal penalties. Marcus froze for a split second, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth. Oh, the paperwork is all digital. Desmond, Tiffany chimed in. Her voice was sickly sweet like syrup covering a pile of rot. "We went paperless to save the environment. You know how it is these days. It is all in the cloud. I am managing the login details for you since you have trouble with all those passwords and authentication apps." "I have trouble with passwords," I asked, keeping my face neutral. "Well, you know." Tiffany laughed, a light tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "You forget things sometimes, Desmond. Like last week when you couldn't find your reading glasses. We just want to make sure the account is safe. We don't want you accidentally locking yourself out or transferring money to some scammer on the internet." She smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I am good with numbers. Desmond," she added. "I was top of my math class in high school. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had dropped out of community college after one semester to pursue a modeling career that never went further than an Instagram page. She was good with numbers, all right? She was good at subtraction, specifically subtracting my wealth from my accounts." I smiled. It was a tight, small smile. "That is very responsible of you, Tiffany," I said. "Thank you for taking that burden off my shoulders." I picked up my knife and fork and began to cut my meat. Inside my head, I was laughing. A cold, dark laugh. Because 2 hours before dinner, while they were showering and dressing up in my clothes, I had been in my study with my iPad. I am 72 years old. Yes, but I am an architect. I have used CAD software that would make their brains melt. And more importantly, I am the one who taught Marcus how to use a computer when he was 6 years old. I taught him everything he knows, but I didn't teach him everything I know. Marcus is lazy. He always has been. He uses the same password for everything, his birthday followed by his high school jersey number. It took me exactly 30 seconds to crack his email, and from there into his online banking, I had seen the Golden Years Healthcare Fund. It didn't exist. There was no trust. There was no high-yield savings account. There was just Marcus's personal checking account, giving me a live feed of a financial hemorrhage. I saw the deposit from Russo, $300,000 cash deposit posted yesterday afternoon. And then I saw the withdrawals, $100,000 wired to CryptoBet, an offshore gambling site. Marcus thought he was a poker shark, but he was just a whale waiting to be harpooned. $50,000 to a luxury car dealership, a down payment on a Porsche 911 GT3. The car key I saw on the table earlier wasn't a lease, it was a purchase, made with the blood of my Shelby, $25,000 to Cartier. The necklace Tiffany was wearing right now, $10,000 to a contact listed only as Vinny. That was the bookie. That was the debt. Marcus was terrified of, and another $5,000 to a liquor store for the wine cellar they were currently drinking from. In less than 24 hours, they had burned through nearly $200,000. 60% of the money was gone, vanished into the ether of their greed. And they sat there telling me it was safe, telling me it was for my health. I chewed the steak slowly, savoring the texture. The irony was delicious. They were feeding me lies, but I was digesting the truth. I need to test them. I thought I need to see how far they will go to sell this narrative of my decline. I let my hand tremble. Just a little at first. A slight vibration in my fingers as I lifted the fork to my mouth. I watched them watching me, their eyes locked onto my shaking hand like vultures, spotting a limping gazelle. Then I let the tremor get worse. My hand shook violently. The silver fork rattled against my teeth, clinking loudly. Then I let my grip slacken. The fork fell. It hit the fine china plate with a loud, harsh clatter, skittering across the porcelain and landing on the pristine white tablecloth, leaving a smear of brown gravy. I gasped, acting confused, staring at my hand as if it belonged to someone else. "Oh dear," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "I am sorry. I don't know what happened." My grip, it just gave out. The room went silent. Marcus looked at the fallen fork. Then he looked at Tiffany. I saw it. The look. It was a look of validation, a look that said, "See? I told you. He is losing it." Tiffany reached over and patted my hand again. "It is okay, Desmond," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "It happens. You are tired. Your motor skills are slipping. It is just part of aging." She looked at Marcus and winked. A slow, deliberate wink that screamed victory. "See, Marcus," she said loudly as if I were deaf. "This is exactly why you were right to sell the car. Imagine if his hand shook like that while he was doing 80 on the highway. He would have killed himself." Marcus nodded, looking solemn, pretending to be the responsible son. You are right, Tiff, Marcus said. He sighed heavily. Dad, this is why we need the fund. This is why we need to look at assisted living options. We can't have you living here alone with all these stairs, all these sharp edges. It is dangerous. I looked down at my hand, the hand that had drawn the blueprints for the tallest tower in the city, the hand that was steady as a rock when I wanted it to be. I am sorry, I mumbled, playing the part. I just feel so useless. You are not useless, Desmond Tiffany said, signaling the maid to clear my plate. You are just retired. You need rest. You need professionals to look after you. I stood up, pushing my chair back slowly, acting as if my legs were stiff. I think I will go to bed. I said I am not hungry anymore. The jet lag is catching up to me. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them there with the rest of the wine. I walked slowly, shuffling my feet until I turned the corner into the hallway. Then I straightened my back. I walked silently past the kitchen toward the ventilation shaft that ran behind the pantry. I designed this house. I know every duct, every crawl space, every acoustic quirk. There is a vent in the dining room that feeds directly into the hallway pantry, carrying sound as clearly as a telephone line. I stood in the dark pantry, leaning my head against the grate. I heard the clink of glasses. He bought it, Marcus said. His voice was relaxed, jubilant. He bought the whole thing, hook, line, and sinker. Did you see his hand shake? He is falling apart. Tiff? He is practically dust. Tiffany laughed. That was easier than I thought. I thought he would fight us on the car, but he is too weak. He knows he is past his prime. So what is the next move? Marcus asked. We burned through half the cash already. Vinny is paid off, but we need more if we are going to maintain this lifestyle. The house, Tiffany whispered. The word hissed through the vent. The house, Marcus repeated. That is a $5 million asset, Tiff, but it is in his name. Not for long, Tiffany said. I called Dr. Stein. He is ready. He will sign the competency report. We get the medical declaration, then we file for emergency guardianship. Once you are his guardian, Marcus, you control the assets. We can sell this place, move him into that facility on the west side, the cheap one, and keep the difference. Marcus hesitated just for a second. The cheap one. Is that safe? Who cares if it is safe? Tiffany snapped. He is 72. He won't know the difference. We put him there. We sell the house, and we move to Miami. Marcus, we can finally live the life we deserve. No more begging, no more hiding. Miami, Marcus said softly. I like the sound of that. I stood in the darkness, listening to them plot my demise, listening to them divide up the carcass of my life before I was even dead. They wanted the house. They wanted to put me in a cheap home to rot while they drank cocktails on South Beach. I felt a cold rage settle in my gut, hard and heavy like a stone. But I didn't storm back in there. I didn't scream. I walked quietly to my study. I took out my phone and texted Harrison. They took the bait. They think I am senile. Proceed with the property appraisal tomorrow. Let the real estate agent come. And Harrison, yes, Desmond. The reply came instantly. Get the paperwork ready for the transfer. The trap is set. I turned off the light in the study, sitting in the darkness, watching the moonlight filter through the trees. You want the house, Tiffany, I whispered. I will give you the house, but you might find the foundation is a little unstable. The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling windows of my living room at exactly 7:15, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I sat in my favorite Eames chair, sipping black coffee and admiring the way the light played off the cantilevered staircase. I designed that staircase myself 30 years ago. It was a marvel of engineering steel and glass that looked like it was floating on air. To anyone else, it was just stairs. To me, it was a sculpture. It was proof that I existed, that I had a vision, and that I had the strength to build it. But to my son and his wife, it was just a hazard, a liability, waiting to be liquidated. The doorbell rang, shattering the peace. It was not a friendly ring. It was the sharp, insistent buzz of someone who wants to sell you something or take something from you. I did not get up. I let the maid answer it. I heard voices in the foyer. Tiffany's high-pitched, eager tone and a man's voice, slick and professional. I took another sip of coffee, stealing myself. Tiffany walked into the living room, guiding a man in a blue suit who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced real estate sharks. He had perfect teeth, a fake tan, and eyes that were already calculating the square footage. Desmond, Tiffany chirped, clapping her hands together. Look who is here. This is Mr. Sterling. He is the top luxury broker in the city. We invited him over for a little chat. Mr. Sterling walked forward, extending a hand that felt like a dead fish. Mr. King, he said, smiling. It is an honor. I have admired your work for decades. This house is a legend. I did not stand up. I looked at him over the rim of my mug. If you admire my work, Mr. Sterling, you would know that I do not invite brokers into my home unless I am buying. So why are you here? Tiffany stepped in, putting a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it just a little too hard. Oh, Desmond, don't be like that. We are just exploring options. Marcus and I were talking last night, and we are so worried about you. This house is 5,000 square feet. It has 4 levels. All those stairs. All that glass. It is a death trap for a man of your age. She looked at Mr. Sterling with wide, sad eyes. He had a little episode at dinner last night. She lied smoothly. His hands were shaking so bad he couldn't even hold a fork. We are terrified he is going to fall down those beautiful stairs and break a hip. Or worse. Mr. Sterling nodded, his face arranging itself into a mask of practiced sympathy. I understand completely. Mrs. King. Safety is paramount, and the market is very hot right now. Mr. King. We could get a premium price for a property like this. Cash buyers bidding war the works. Tiffany beamed. We found a place for you, Desmond. It is called Serenity Gardens. It is a 5-star assisted living facility. They have nurses, 24/7 heated floors, no stairs, and a bingo night every Tuesday. You would love it. Bingo night. I thought I would rather be buried alive. I looked at Marcus, who was standing in the doorway, refusing to make eye contact. He was wearing a new watch, a Breitling heavy gold, purchased with the money from my car, no doubt. So, you want to sell my house? I said slowly, putting my mug down. We want to downsize you, Tiffany corrected, to liquidize your assets so you can enjoy your golden years without the burden of maintenance. I stood up slowly, leaning on the arm of the chair, acting as if the movement pained me. I suppose you are right. I sighed. The maintenance is becoming a bit much. Tiffany's eyes lit up. She looked at Marcus and mouthed, He is agreeing. Mr. Sterling smiled, clapping his hands. Excellent decision. Mr. King, shall we do a walkthrough? I need to assess the condition to set the listing price. Based on the comps in this zip code, we are looking at 5 million easily, maybe 5.5. 5 million. The number hung in the air, breathless and heavy. That was the jackpot. That was the Miami mansion and the yacht Marcus and Tiffany were dreaming of. I walked over to Mr. Sterling. My posture stooped, my steps shuffling. I would be happy to show you around, I said. But in the spirit of full disclosure, Mr. Sterling, there are some things you should know, some structural quirks. Only the architect would know. Mr. Sterling pulled out a notepad. Of course. Mr. King, quirks are normal in custom homes. I led them to the main structural pillar in the foyer, a massive column of raw concrete that supported the entire second floor. You see this, I said, tapping it with my knuckle. It looks solid, doesn't it? It looks magnificent, Mr. Sterling said. It is actually suffering from carbonation, induced corrosion. I lied. My voice lowered to a conspiratorial whisper. I used a new experimental concrete mix back in '92. It was supposed to be revolutionary, but it turns out it reacts with the humidity. We have microfractures spreading through the core. If you listen closely at night, you can hear the rebar snapping. Mr. Sterling stopped writing. He looked at the pillar nervously. Rebar snapping, he asked. Yes, I said, shaking my head sadly. It is only a matter of time before the load-bearing capacity fails. We might have a year, maybe 2, before the second floor collapses into the foyer. Tiffany's jaw dropped. Desmond, what are you talking about? The house is fine. I looked at her with a confused, innocent expression. Is it Tiffany? I asked innocently. Remember the crack in the bedroom ceiling last week? You said it was just settling. But I know it is the sheer walls failing. The foundation was poured on a clay shelf that is slowly liquefying due to the new drainage system the city installed. Liquefying? Mr. Sterling asked, stepping back from the wall as if the floor was about to open up beneath him. I nodded solemnly. It is a tragedy, really. To fix it, you would need to underpin the entire structure. Jack up the house, pour 20 tons of new concrete, It would cost $2 million, minimum, and even then the insurance company won't touch it. I watched the color drain from Mr. Sterling's face. He wasn't seeing a $5 million commission anymore. He was seeing a lawsuit. We walked into the kitchen, the chef's kitchen with the imported granite countertops, and the plumbing, I said, tapping the sink. Beautiful fixtures, but the pipes are galvanized steel behind the walls. They are rusting from the inside out. The water has a high lead content. We have to filter it 3 times just to make it drinkable. That is why my hands shake. Tiffany, it is the lead poisoning, Tiffany gasped. That is a lie. The water is fine. Is it? I asked, looking at her. Maybe that is why you have been getting those headaches lately, dear. The toxicity builds up over time. Mr. Sterling closed his notebook. He looked around the room with suspicion, not awe. Mr. King, he said, his voice tight, are there any other issues? I sighed deeply, rubbing my temples. The electrical, I said quietly. Aluminum wiring. It was a code violation, but I got a waiver at the time. Now the insulation is degrading. We have shorts in the walls constantly. Honestly, I sleep with a fire extinguisher next to my bed. I am surprised the place hasn't burned down yet. That was the final blow. Mr. Sterling put his pen away. He didn't want to see the upstairs. He didn't want to see the pool. I think I have seen enough, he said. He looked at Tiffany with a cold, hard stare. You didn't mention the structural defects, Mrs. King, or the environmental hazards. We didn't know, Tiffany stammered. He is making it up. The house is perfect. Look at it. I can't list a property with foundational failure and lead pipes, Mr. Sterling said, backing toward the front door. The liability is too high. But the land, Tiffany shrieked, the land alone is worth $3 million, not with a condemned structure sitting on it that costs millions to demolish, Mr. Sterling said. He looked at me with pity. Mr. King, you should really disclose this to the city. You are living in a dangerous environment. I nodded sadly. I know. That is why they want to move me. I suppose they are just trying to save me from the collapse. Mr. Sterling left practically running to his car. The front door closed and the silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Marcus stood in the middle of the foyer staring at the pillar I had lied about. Is it true? Dad, he whispered. Is the house really falling down? I looked at him. My son. The fool. He lived here for 30 years, and he didn't know that concrete grows stronger over time, not weaker. It is tired, Marcus, I said, my voice weary, just like me. It is old bones crumbling, just like your father. Tiffany was pacing back and forth furious. That was a disaster, she hissed. We needed that valuation, Desmond. You just tanked the price. Sterling is going to tell everyone. The market will blacklist us. I sat down on the bottom step, resting my head in my hands. I was just being honest, Tiffany, I said. If we sell it, I don't want to be sued. I guess the house isn't worth $5 million after all. Maybe $1 million. If we are lucky. $1 million, Tiffany screamed, her face twisted into an ugly mask. $1 million doesn't cover the debts. It doesn't cover the Miami house. It doesn't cover anything. She kicked the wall, leaving a scuff mark on the pristine paint. We are screwed, she muttered to Marcus. We are totally screwed. I stood up slowly. I am going to take a nap, I said. This excitement has worn me out. I walked past them, climbing the stairs that were perfectly solid, perfectly safe. As I reached the landing, I looked down. They were arguing, whispering frantically, huddled together like rats on a sinking ship. Tiffany had thrown her handbag onto the console table in the hallway in her rage. It was sitting there open. I walked into my bedroom, but I didn't close the door. I waited. I listened. I heard them move into the kitchen, arguing about money, arguing about the bookie. I slipped back out into the hallway, moving silently across the carpet. I reached the console table. I looked inside the expensive leather bag that Marcus had bought her with my money. There were lipstick tubes, sunglasses, a pack of slim cigarettes, and a thick manila folder. I pulled it out carefully. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from exertion, but from adrenaline. The label on the folder was printed in bold black letters. State of Illinois, petition for emergency conservatorship. Subject Desmond King. Petitioner Marcus King. I opened it, taking a quick photo of the first page with my phone. It was all there. The lies. The claim that I was mentally incompetent. the claim that I was a danger to myself and others, the request for full control over my medical decisions, my finances, and my estate. And at the bottom of the page, a signature, Dr. Leonard Stein. I closed the folder and slid it back into the bag exactly where it was. I retreated to my bedroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands trembling. This time the tremor was real. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were trying to bury me while I was still breathing. They wanted to strip me of my rights, declare me insane, and lock me away in a room where I couldn't stop them from spending my life's work. I looked at the photo on my phone, Dr. Stein, I whispered. I picked up my phone and dialed Harrison. We have a name. I said, Dr. Leonard Stein. Find out everything. Harrison. Does he gamble? Does he drink? Does he have debts? I want to own him by the end of the week. I walked to the window looking out at the estate that I had just devalued to save it. They want a war, I said to the reflection in the glass. They just declared it on the wrong architect. The Porsche smelled like new leather and betrayal. Marcus was driving fast, his hands gripping the wheel of the car he had bought with the money from my stolen Shelby. We were weaving through traffic, heading toward the medical district. The engine purred with German engineering, but the silence inside the cabin was heavy and suffocating. Marcus kept checking his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his sunglasses, trying to look like the successful son, taking his aging father for a routine errand. But I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. I saw the nervous tick in his jaw. He was taking me to the slaughterhouse, and he knew it. We are just going for a quick checkup, Dad, Marcus said for the third time, breaking the silence. It is a requirement for the new insurance policy. Tiffany found for you. Standard procedure, checking the vitals, checking the cognitive baseline. You know how it is. I nodded, staring out the window at the passing city I helped build. I looked at the steel skeletons of the skyscrapers rising against the gray sky. Standard procedure, I repeated. My voice was soft, raspy, the voice of a man who was fading. Just a checkup. We pulled up to a nondescript medical building on the outskirts of town. It was not the university hospital where my personal physician of 20 years practiced. It was a private clinic tucked away between a dry cleaner and a payday loan office. The sign on the door read, "The Stein Center for Cognitive Health." I stepped out of the car, leaning heavily on my cane, acting as if the curb was a mountain. Marcus rushed to my side, taking my elbow, guiding me like I was fragile glass. We walked into the waiting room. It was cold, sterile, and empty except for a receptionist who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. She didn't ask for my insurance card. She just nodded at Marcus as if she was expecting us. Mr. King. Dr. Stein is ready for you, she said. We walked down a long hallway lined with abstract art that looked like ink blots tests designed to make you see monsters where there were none. Marcus opened a heavy oak door and we stepped into the office of the man who was paid to steal my mind. Dr. Leonard Stein sat behind a glass desk that was too large for the room. He was a small man with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than a nurse's yearly salary. He wore a gold watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. He stood up, extending a hand that felt damp and cold. Mr. King, he said, his voice smooth like oil. It is a pleasure. Marcus has told me so much about you. I shook his hand, letting my grip be weak, letting my arm tremble just a fraction. Dr. Stein, I mumbled, looking confused. Marcus said this was for insurance. Dr. Stein smiled, a shark smiling at a seal. It is for your wellness. Desmond. Can I call you Desmond? We just want to make sure you are operating at peak efficiency. We are going to run a few simple tests. Just a conversation, really. He gestured for me to sit in a low leather chair that was difficult to get out of, a power move. I noted it. I sat down, sinking into the cushion, looking up at him like a child, looking at a principal. I reached into the breast pocket of my jacket. Do you mind if I keep my pen? I asked, holding up a silver fountain pen. It was a gift from my late wife. It brings me comfort. Dr. Stein glanced at it dismissively. Of course. Desmond, hold on to whatever makes you feel safe. He didn't know that the pen was a high-fidelity recording device with a 12-hour battery life. I clicked the top, subtly engaging the microphone. The red light was hidden. The trap was set. Let us begin, Dr. Stein said, opening a file folder that was disturbingly thin. He started with the basics, asking me the date, the president, the city, I answered them all correctly, but I hesitated. I paused before saying the year, acting as if I had to search through a fog to find the number. Good Dr. Stein said, making a note, but his tone suggested it wasn't good. It suggested I was struggling. Now, Desmond, I am going to say 3 words. I want you to remember them. We will come back to them later. Are you ready? I nodded. Apple penny table. Dr. Stein said. Apple penny table. I repeated. Excellent. Now I want you to draw a clock for me. Set the hands to 10 past 11. He pushed a piece of paper and a pencil across the desk. I picked up the pencil. I am an architect. I have drawn blueprints for stadiums and airports. I can draw a perfect circle with my eyes closed. But today, I let my hand shake. I drew the circle slightly lopsided. I put the numbers in the correct places. But I hesitated on the hands. I made the minute hand slightly too short. Dr. Stein watched me like a hawk, watching a mouse in a maze. Interesting, he muttered, scratching something on his pad. He asked more questions. Math problems, logic puzzles. I answered them, but I added the flavor of confusion, asking him to repeat himself, acting frustrated, rubbing my temples. Then came the pivot, the moment where the medical exam turned into a legal execution. Desmond, Dr. Stein said, leaning forward, clasping his hands simply. Do you know why you are here? Really? I looked at him, blinking rapidly. Insurance, I said. He shook his head sadly, giving Marcus a look of profound sympathy. No, Desmond. You are here because your family is worried about you. Marcus tells me you have been forgetting things, losing time, getting aggressive. He tells me you sold a very expensive car recently for a fraction of its value because you were confused about the currency. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. I didn't sell it, I stammered, playing the part. I gave it to a friend. Dr. Stein sighed. It is classic behavior. Desmond confabulation. You are filling in the gaps of your memory with stories. The test results confirm it. You struggled with the clock. You hesitated on the year. He leaned back, delivering the verdict with the weight of a judge. I am diagnosing you with early onset dementia. Desmond. Specifically, frontotemporal degeneration. It affects judgment, impulse control, and financial decision-making. Dementia, I whispered, letting my voice tremble. My mind is going. It is progressing, Dr. Stein said. But we caught it early. However, you are in a vulnerable state. You cannot be trusted to manage your own affairs anymore. You are a danger to your own legacy. He opened a drawer and pulled out a document. I am recommending an immediate conservatorship, Dr. Stein said, placing the paper on the desk. Marcus here is willing to step up. He is willing to take the burden of your finances, your estate, and your medical decisions so you can focus on resting. It is the only way to protect you from yourself. I stared at the paper. It was the death warrant for my freedom. It was the key to my vault being handed to a gambler and a grifter. Marcus finally spoke, his voice thick with fake emotion. It is for your own good, Dad, he said, reaching out to touch my arm. I promise I will take care of everything. You won't have to worry about bills or the house or anything. Tiffany and I will handle. I looked at my son. I saw the greed behind the tears. I saw the relief in his eyes that the doctor had delivered the lie so perfectly. I looked at Dr. Stein. So I am sick? I asked. You are declining, Desmond, Dr. Stein corrected. But with the right care in a controlled environment, you can be comfortable. I took a deep breath, clutching the spy pen in my pocket. So does this mean, I asked, looking up with wide, fearful eyes. Does this mean I can't drive anymore? Dr. Stein laughed. It was a short, dismissive bark of a laugh. Drive? Oh, heavens no, Desmond. That part of your life is over. You are a danger behind the wheel. You sold the car, remember? But even if you had it, I would revoke your license today. He smiled a cruel final smile. Cars are the past. Desmond. You need to focus on your chair, your bed, your soup. The open road is for people who know where they are going. I nodded slowly, absorbing the insult, letting it fuel the fire in my gut. I understand, I said softly. I understand completely. I stood up. Struggling out of the low chair, Marcus jumped up to help me, but I waved him off. I need to go home now. I said, I am tired. The diagnosis. It is a lot to take in. Of course, Dr. Stein said, standing up. I will file this report with the court immediately. Marcus, you have the paperwork for the hearing next week. We do, Marcus said, gripping the file tight. Thank you, doctor. You have saved us. No, Dr. Stein said, shaking Marcus's hand. You saved him. We walked out of the office, back down the hallway of ink blots, back into the cold waiting room. I walked slowly, my head down, playing the defeated old man. But inside, my mind was racing, calculating stacking the bricks of my counterattack. As we got into the Porsche, Marcus looked at me. See, Dad, he said, starting the engine. It is not so bad. Now you can relax. We will take care of the heavy lifting. I didn't answer. I just closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cool glass. Drive, Marcus, I whispered. Take me home. He drove fast, eager to get back to Tiffany, eager to tell her that the plan worked, that the doctor had signed the line, that the old man was officially broken. When we got back to the estate, I went straight to my study. I told them I needed to nap. I locked the door. I took the pen out of my pocket and plugged it into my computer. I downloaded the audio file. It was crystal clear. Every lie, every threat, every scratch of the pen. I opened a secure chat window. Harrison, I typed, I am here. Des, I am sending you an audio file. I typed, my fingers flying across the keys. The doctor is a hack. His name is Leonard Stein. He diagnosed me with dementia after a 10-minute conversation and recommended Marcus as conservator. He is in on it. I waited for the file to upload. Harrison, listen to me. I typed, I want a full background check on Stein by morning. I want to know where he went to school. I want to know who he sleeps with. And most importantly, I want to know who he owes money to. A doctor who takes bribes to diagnose healthy men with dementia is a doctor who is desperate, I typed. Find his debt, Harrison. Find out who holds his mortgage, his practice loans, his gambling markers, and then buy it. Buy it, Harrison replied. Yes, I typed. Buy it all. Become his creditor. Become his nightmare. I want to own the paper on his life. So when he stands in that courtroom next week, he won't be testifying for Marcus. He will be testifying for the man who owns his future. I hit send. I sat back in my chair, listening to the silence of the house. They said cars are the past. Dr. Stein, I whispered to the empty room. You are about to find out that I am still driving, and I am about to run you over. The afternoon sun was filtering through the leaves of the Japanese maple tree in the courtyard, casting dappled shadows on the stone patio. I sat in my wicker chair, a cup of chamomile tea resting on the glass table beside me. The garden was peaceful, the only sound being the gentle trickle of the koi pond fountain. It was the kind of peace that usually precedes a hurricane, and I was the one who had seeded the clouds. I watched Marcus through the sliding glass doors. He was pacing by the swimming pool, phone pressed to his ear, wearing a pair of designer sunglasses that cost more than my first car. He looked like a man who owned the world, confident, relaxed, answering the call with a swagger. But I knew who was on the other end of that line. It was not a business partner, it was not a friend, it was a man named Russo. Or at least that was the name he was using. For Marcus, Russo was the private collector who had paid $300,000 cash for my Shelby GT500, but in reality Russo was an actor named Silas, a man I had hired from a local theater troupe purely for his ability to project menace. I took a sip of tea and waited for the performance to begin. I saw Marcus stop pacing. His posture changed instantly. The swagger evaporated, replaced by a rigid tension. He pulled the sunglasses off his face, his eyes wide with confusion. What do you mean it is a fake? Marcus said, his voice carrying through the open door. I smiled into my tea. You see, Marcus thought he had sold my crown jewel. He thought he had liberated the legendary 1967 Shelby from my garage. But Marcus is not a car guy. He is a label guy. He sees a badge, he sees a shape, and he assumes value. He never bothered to check the VIN number. He never bothered to look at the engine block casting. The car he sold was not the real Shelby. The real Eleanor was sitting comfortably in a climate-controlled vault in a storage facility 3 towns over, safe and sound. The car in the garage was a high-end replica, a kit car I had built myself on a Mustang chassis for weekend drives when I didn't want to risk the $1 million asset. It was a beautiful machine, indistinguishable from the original to the untrained eye. But to a collector, it was worth maybe $40,000. Tops, Marcus had sold a $40,000 copy for $300,000. He had committed fraud on a massive scale, and now the buyer was calling to collect. I watched Marcus listening intently, his face draining of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. "Mr. Russo, please calm down," Marcus stammered, dragging a hand through his hair. "It has to be a mistake. My father owned that car for 30 years. It is the real deal. I have the title." He didn't have the title. He had a forgery. He had printed off the internet. I could imagine Silas on the other end playing his role perfectly, screaming about lawsuits, screaming about police, screaming about the fact that the chassis number didn't match the Shelby registry. "Listen," Marcus shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Don't call the cops. We can work this out. I will refund you. Just bring the car back, and I will give you the cash." I leaned forward. This was the moment I knew exactly how much money was left in Marcus's account. I had checked it 10 minutes ago. The $300,000 was gone, evaporated into the ether of bad decisions. He had spent $50,000 on the Porsche, $25,000 on Tiffany's necklace, $100,000 on gambling debts, and the rest on a down payment for a condo in Miami. He was planning to surprise Tiffany with. He was broke. "I don't have it on me right now," Marcus said, his voice cracking into a high-pitched squeak. "I tied it up in investments, but I can get it. Give me 24 hours. Mr. Russo, please, just 24 hours. Do not go to the police. If you go to the police, my life is over." He listened for a moment longer, nodding frantically at the empty air. Okay. Tomorrow noon. Cash. I promise." He hung up the phone and dropped it onto the patio furniture like it was made of molten lead. He stood there hyperventilating, clutching his chest, looking like he was having the heart attack he claimed I was at risk for. He had promised to return $300,000. He didn't have, to a man who was threatening to send him to prison for fraud. I watched him run his hands over his face, wiping away sweat. He looked around the patio, wild-eyed, looking for a lifeline. Then he ran inside. He burst into the living room where Tiffany was lounging on the sofa reading a fashion magazine. She looked up, annoyed by his frantic entrance. "Babe, we have a problem," Marcus gasped, leaning over the back of the couch. "What is it?" Tiffany asked, not even closing the magazine. "Did the sushi place cancel our reservation?" "It is the car," Marcus whispered, looking toward the patio doors to make sure I wasn't listening. "It is the car. The guy Russo," he called. "He says it is a fake. He says it is a replica. A replica." Tiffany frowned, putting the magazine down. "What are you talking about? Your dad loved that car. He said it was worth $1 million. "He lied," Marcus hissed. "He must have bought a knockoff to look cool. The VIN doesn't match. Russo checked the registry. He says I scammed him. He says if I don't give him the money back by tomorrow noon, he is going to the cops. Tiff, he is going to the cops for grand larceny and fraud. I forged the title. Remember, if they look at it, I am going to jail for 10 years. Tiffany stared at him, processing the information. Her face didn't show fear for her husband. It showed calculation for herself. "So give him the money back," she said coldly. "Just reverse the wire." "I can't," Marcus cried, throwing his hands up. "We spent it, Tiff. The gambling debt, the necklace, the Porsche, the condo deposit. It is all gone. I have maybe $5,000 left in the account." Tiffany stood up slowly, smoothing her silk dress. "Well, that sounds like a you problem, Marcus," she said. "A me problem." Marcus stared at her, incredulous. "We spent it together, Tiff. You are wearing $25,000 around your neck right now. Give it to me. I can return it. I can return the Porsche. I can try to get the deposit back, form the condo. We can scrape together maybe half, and I can beg him for a payment plan." Tiffany took a step back, her hand going to her throat, covering the diamond necklace protectively. "Are you insane?" she snapped. "I am not returning this necklace. It was a gift. And we are not returning the Porsche. We need that car to maintain appearances. If we start selling things now, people will talk. They will know we are broke." Marcus grabbed her shoulders, shaking her slightly. "Tiff, listen to me. This isn't about appearances. This is about prison. If I don't pay him, he calls the cops. And if the cops come, they find out about the forgery. They find out I sold Dad's car without permission. The whole plan falls apart. The conservatorship, the house, everything. We lose it all." Tiffany pushed him away, her eyes hard as flint. "Then fix it. Marcus, find the money somewhere else. Borrow it, steal it. I don't care, but do not touch my jewelry, and do not touch the condo fund. That is our escape plan. But I did this for us." Marcus pleaded, tears forming in his eyes. "I took the risk for us. You have to help me." "I am helping you," Tiffany said, her voice dripping with venom. I am telling you to be a man and handle your business. You got scammed by your senile father, Marcus. You sold a fake car. That is your mistake. Don't drag me down with you." She turned and walked toward the stairs, leaving him standing in the middle of the living room looking like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. I waited a beat, then I opened the sliding door and stepped inside, leaning heavily on my cane. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice mild and confused. I heard shouting. Marcus jumped, spinning around to face me. He wiped his eyes quickly, trying to compose himself, but he was vibrating with panic. "Everything is fine, Dad," he lied, his voice shaking. "Just a work call, a deal falling through. Stress, you know." "Ah, stress," said, nodding slowly, walking over to the sideboard to pour myself more tea. "I remember stress. It is terrible for the heart. You should be careful, Marcus. You look pale." "I am fine," Marcus snapped. Then he softened, realizing he might need me. "Dad, I was wondering about the car, the Shelby." "What about it?" I asked, taking a sip. "When you bought it, did you get it authenticated?" Marcus asked, watching me closely. "Was it the original?" I looked at him. I let a small smile play on my lips, the smile of a man lost in memory. "Oh, Eleanor," I sighed. "She was a beauty, wasn't she? I bought her back in '98 from a lovely gentleman in Texas. Or was it Arizona? My memory isn't what it used to be. But she looked fast, didn't she?" Marcus looked at me, searching for a straight answer, searching for a confession that I knew it was a fake, but I gave him nothing, just the rambling of an old man. "She looked fast," Marcus repeated dully. "Yes," I said, "and she was loud. I remember the engine roared like a lion." "Why do you ask, son? The collector is enjoying it, isn't he?" Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Yeah, Dad. The collector loves it. He just had some questions about the history." "Well, tell him to enjoy the ride," I said, placing my cup on the saucer with a delicate clink. "Because once you sell something, Marcus, you can never really get it back." "Can you?" I looked him dead in the eye for a second, letting the mask slip just a fraction, letting him see the steel underneath. Marcus flinched. He didn't know what I knew, but he felt the weight of my words. "I have to go," Marcus said abruptly, grabbing his keys. "I have to go see a guy about a loan." "A loan?" I asked pleasantly. "Be careful with loans, son. Interest rates are murder these days." He didn't answer. He ran out the front door, slamming it behind him. I watched him go, watched him run to his Porsche, watched him peel out of the driveway, leaving rubber on the asphalt. He was driving a $100,000 car to go beg for scraps. He was going to the Sharks to pay off the wolves. I turned and looked at the stairs where Tiffany had disappeared. She had abandoned him the moment the water got rough. She held on to her diamonds while he drowned. It was exactly what I expected. I pulled out my phone and texted Harrison. "Phase 2 is active. The rat is cornered and the ship is sinking. Keep the pressure on Russo. Tell him to call Marcus every hour on the hour." I walked back to the patio and sat down in the sun. The tea was still warm. I closed my eyes and listened to the fountain. "Run, Marcus," I whispered. "Run as fast as you can. You are only running in circles." The engine of the Mercedes SUV purred to life in the driveway, echoing off the brick facade of my home. It was 2 in the afternoon, a time when honest people are working and dishonest people are busy covering their tracks. I watched from the window of my study as Tiffany walked out the front door. She was dressed for a runway show, wearing oversized sunglasses, a silk scarf tied around her neck, and carrying a Birkin bag that I knew for a fact Marcus had bought with the first withdrawal from my stolen account. "I am going to the city," she had announced earlier, her voice light and airy, "just a little retail therapy. Desmond, I need to pick up some things for the house, maybe look at some curtains for your new room at the facility." She smiled when she said it, that tight, practiced smile that never reached her eyes. I nodded, playing the part of the befuddled old man. "Have fun, dear," I said. "Buy something pretty." But as soon as her taillights disappeared down the long driveway, I moved with a speed that would have shocked her. I grabbed the keys to my old Buick LeSabre, a car I kept under a tarp in the back shed. It was a relic, a nondescript beige sedan that smelled of dust and old leather, but it was invisible on the road. No one looks twice at a beige Buick driven by an old man in a flat cap. It was the perfect surveillance vehicle. I followed her, keeping 2 cars between us at all times. I know the rhythm of this city. I designed half the intersections downtown. I know how the lights change. I know the shortcuts. But Tiffany wasn't taking shortcuts, and she wasn't heading downtown to the magnificent mile where the luxury boutiques lined the streets. She was heading south. I watched as the scenery changed. The manicured lawns of our suburb gave way to the concrete sprawl of the highway, and then the highway gave way to the potholed streets of the industrial district. The architecture shifted from limestone and glass to crumbling brick and rusted steel. We were entering a part of town where the streetlights were broken and the hope had dried up years ago. Tiffany pulled her $80,000 SUV into the parking lot of a dilapidated apartment complex. The building was a sore thumb, a brutalist concrete block stained with soot and graffiti. The sign out front read, "The height but the H had fallen off, leaving only the 8." I parked across the street behind a dumpster and killed the engine. I reached into my glove box and pulled out my camera. It was a Leica with a telephoto lens, heavy and precise. I adjusted the focus, bringing the scene into sharp relief. Tiffany stepped out of the car. She looked out of place like a diamond in a gutter. She looked around nervously, checking the corners, checking the windows, but she didn't check the beige car across the street. A door on the ground floor opened. A man stepped out. He was not Marcus. He was the opposite of Marcus. Marcus was soft, doughy from easy living. This man was hardwired with muscle and bad decisions. He wore a tight t-shirt that showed off tattoos climbing up his neck and ripped jeans. He had a cigarette dangling from his lip. I zoomed in, snapping the shutter. Click. Tiffany didn't recoil from the grit. She ran to him. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It wasn't a friendly peck. It was passionate, desperate, the kind of kiss that carries a history. Click, click. I watched them separate. The man said something, laughing, wiping lipstick from his mouth. He held out his hand, palm up, the universal gesture for payment. Tiffany reached into her Birkin bag. She pulled out a thick white envelope. It was bulging. I knew what was in that envelope. It was cash. It was the money Marcus had frantically scraped together, hoping to pay off Russo, hoping to save his skin. Tiffany had told him she didn't have it. She had told him to figure it out himself. But here she was, handing Marcus's lifeline to a stranger in a parking lot. The man took the envelope. He didn't count it. He just weighed it in his hand and grinned. He tucked it into his back pocket and slapped Tiffany on the rear end. She giggled, a sound that I couldn't hear, but I could see in the way her shoulders moved. Click, I captured the exchange perfectly. The kiss, the cash, the betrayal. This wasn't a brother. This wasn't a cousin. This was an exit strategy. Tiffany wasn't just planning to leave me in a home, she was planning to leave Marcus too. She was milking the cow dry before she slaughtered it, and she was funding her next life with my son's inheritance. I felt a cold, hard knot in my stomach. It wasn't pity for Marcus. He had brought this on himself by marrying a predator, but it was a violation of my house. My money was flowing into the pocket of this thug. I watched them talk for another minute. The man lit another cigarette, leaning against the Mercedes as if he owned it. Tiffany stroked his arm, looking at him with an adoration she had never shown my son. Then she got back in the car. I waited until she turned the corner before I started the Buick. She didn't need to follow her anymore. I had the evidence, I had the leverage. I drove home, taking the long way, letting the anger simmer down into a cold calculation. When I got back to the estate, I put the Buick away and went into the house through the side door. I sat in the living room reading a book, waiting for the performance to resume. Tiffany came home an hour later. She walked in flushed and happy, carrying a few small shopping bags from a department store, props she must have bought on the way back to cover her tracks. "Desmond," she called out, "I am back. Look, I bought you some new slippers for the facility. They have memory foam." She held up a pair of cheap gray slippers. "Thank you, Tiffany," I said, closing my book. "You are too kind. Did you find everything you needed?" "Oh, yes," she said, dropping onto the sofa, kicking off her heels. It was exhausted. The traffic was terrible on Michigan Avenue. "I bet it was," I said, looking at her shoes. There was a smudge of oil on the heel, likely from the parking lot of the apartment complex. Marcus walked in. Then, he looked terrible. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. He had spent the day trying to borrow money, trying to find a way to pay Russo by noon tomorrow. He looked at Tiffany with desperation. "Did you have a good time?" he asked, his voice tight. "Wonderful," Tiffany said, ignoring his panic. "I needed to clear my head. Marcus, you should try it." She stood up, walking over to the mirror to adjust her necklace. The diamond choker sparkled under the recessed lighting. "That is a beautiful piece," I said, speaking up from my chair. My voice was mild, conversational. Tiffany turned, touching the stones. "It is, isn't it? Marcus has good taste." I stood up, leaning on my cane, and walked over to her. I peered closely at the diamonds invading her personal space just enough to make her uncomfortable. "It catches the light beautifully," I said. "But you know, Tiffany, you have to be careful with these modern settings." "Careful?" she asked, frowning. "Yes," I said, tapping the center stone with my finger. "Sometimes when the setting is cheap, the stone can fall out, and sometimes the stone itself isn't real." The room went quiet. Marcus looked up from his misery. "What do you mean, Dad?" Marcus asked. I shrugged, backing away. "I am just saying, son. In my line of work, we learn to spot structural flaws. A facade can look perfect, but if the core is rotten, it eventually cracks. And sometimes people sell you glass and tell you it is diamond." I looked Tiffany dead in the eye. "You should get it appraised, my dear, just to be sure. It would be a shame if you were walking around wearing a fake, wouldn't it?" Tiffany's hand went to her throat, clutching the necklace. Her eyes darted to mine, searching for meaning, searching to see if I knew. But I just smiled, the vacant smile of a senile old man. "Just a thought," I said, turning toward the stairs. "I am going to rest before dinner. My hip is acting up." I walked up the stairs, feeling her eyes boring into my back. She was rattled. She was wondering if I had seen something or if I was just rambling. But paranoia is a slow poison, and I had just administered the first dose. I went into my study and locked the door. I took the memory card out of the camera and plugged it into my computer. The photos were high-resolution, crisp, and damning. I opened the image of Tiffany kissing the man, the Mercedes in the background, the grim apartment building, the sheer tawdriness of it all. Then I opened the image of the cash exchange, the white envelope changing hands. I pulled up my email client. I didn't type. Marcus's personal email. He checked that on his phone constantly, and Tiffany might see the notification over his shoulder. I typed in his work email, the address for the consulting firm he claimed to work for, but really just used as a mail drop for his few legitimate contacts. He only checked it when he was desperate for a job or looking for a loan, and right now he was desperate. I attached the photos. I didn't write a long explanation. I didn't write a subject line like "your wife is cheating." I typed one word in the subject line: spam. It was innocuous. It was boring. It was the kind of email you scroll past 10 times before you open it out of boredom or desperation. But when he opened it, he would find the truth. I hit send. The progress bar moved across the screen. Sent. I sat back in my chair, interlacing my fingers. The bomb was planted. The timer was ticking. Tomorrow at noon. Russo would call demanding the money. Marcus would be frantic, looking for funds, looking for an email from a lender, and he would find this. He would see his wife giving his money to another man while he was drowning. I looked out the window at the darkening sky. "You wanted to put me in a home. Tiffany," I whispered. "You wanted to take my house. Well, I just took your husband, and tomorrow I take your freedom." The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock in the morning. It was not the Amazon delivery driver, and it was not the gardener. It was a heavy, authoritative ring, the kind that comes with a badge and a gun. I was sitting in the living room listening to Miles Davis on the vinyl player, reading a book on brutalist architecture. When the peace of my home was shattered, I watched the sheriff's deputy standing on my porch through the glass. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, holding a thick manila envelope. I knew what was in that envelope. I had been expecting it ever since I saw the folder in Tiffany's bag. But knowing an avalanche is coming does not make the snow feel any warmer when it hits you. I did not get up to answer it. Marcus did. He ran to the door, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. He opened it with a solemn expression, his face arranged into a mask of deep, tragic concern. Tiffany stood behind him, clutching a handkerchief, dabbing at dry eyes. "Mr. Desmond King," the deputy asked, stepping into the foyer. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane, shuffling forward. The deputy looked at me, then at the paper in his hand, then back at me. He saw an old black man in a cardigan looking frail and confused. He did not see the man who had designed the courthouse he had just come from. "I am Desmond King," I said, my voice soft. "Sir, I am here to serve you with a court order." The deputy handed me the thick packet. It was heavy. It felt like a brick. "It is a petition for emergency conservatorship, filed by your son Marcus King. The hearing is set for Friday morning at 9 a.m. I took the envelope. My hands trembled just enough to sell the performance. Conservatorship, I whispered, looking at the word typed in bold letters. What does that mean? Am I being arrested? No, Dad. Marcus stepped forward, putting a hand on my shoulder, squeezing it gently. No one is arresting you. It is for your protection. He looked at the deputy with tears in his eyes. My father has been struggling lately, Marcus said, his voice cracking perfectly. He has been making dangerous financial decisions. He gets confused. He forgets who people are. We just want to make sure he is safe. We want to manage his affairs so he doesn't lose everything he worked for. The deputy nodded sympathetically, looking at Marcus like he was a saint. I understand, sir. It is a hard thing to do. But it looks like you are doing the right thing. I looked at Marcus. He was crying actual tears, or at least he was squeezing his eyes hard enough to produce them. I am so sorry, Dad, he sobbed. I didn't want to do this. But Dr. Stein said it was necessary. He said you are declining fast. I cannot watch you destroy yourself. I love you too much. Tiffany sniffled loudly behind him. Oh, Desmond, please don't be mad. We are doing this because we love you. I looked at the packet in my hands, the State of Illinois versus Desmond King petition for temporary guardianship. It cited the medical report from Dr. Stein. It cited the sale of the Shelby as evidence of financial incompetence. It cited my shaking hands, my confusion, my supposed paranoia. It was a masterpiece of fiction. I looked at the deputy. Thank you, officer, I said. The deputy tipped his hat and left, glad to be out of the house, glad to leave the tragedy behind. Closed doors. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. Marcus wiped his eyes instantly. The tears vanished as if he had turned off a faucet. He looked at me, waiting for a reaction, waiting for me to scream, to fight, to deny it. He wanted a confrontation. He wanted me to prove Dr. Stein right by acting aggressive. But I gave him nothing. I walked back to my chair, the heavy envelope in my hand. I sat down, groaning slightly as my joints settled. I looked at the coffee table. My cup of coffee was sitting there, steaming hot. I looked at the envelope again. So I have to go to court? I asked, looking at the cover page. Yes, Dad, Marcus said, his voice hardening just a little, regaining his confidence. You have to go. The judge needs to sign off on it. But don't worry, you won't have to say much. The lawyers will handle it. I nodded slowly. I picked up my coffee cup, then I paused, holding it in midair. I don't have a coaster, I said. Marcus frowned. What a coaster, I repeated, looking around the table. I don't want to leave a ring on the mahogany. Your mother would kill me if I ruined the finish. I looked at the court order, the legal document that threatened to strip me of my civil rights. I gripped the corner of the cover page, the thick cardstock. Reep. The sound was loud and crisp in the quiet room. I tore a perfect square off the bottom of the petition right through the official court stamp. Marcus's jaw dropped. Dad, what are you doing? He gasped. That is a legal document. I placed the torn piece of paper on the table. Then I set my hot coffee mug on top of it, perfectly centered. There, I said, smiling at him. That is better. No rings. Marcus stared at me. He looked at Tiffany. She looked back at him, her eyes wide. He is gone, she mouthed. Silently, he is totally gone. They thought I was so far gone that I didn't understand the gravity of the paper. They thought I was just an old man, worried about furniture polish while the roof was caving in. Okay, Dad, Marcus said, letting out a breath of relief, laughing nervously. Okay, you enjoy your coffee. We have some calls to make. I watched them walk into the kitchen. I heard them high-five. I heard the refrigerator open, the pop of a champagne cork. They were celebrating. They thought the war was over. They thought the paper I had just used as a coaster was the white flag of my surrender. I sipped my coffee. It was black and bitter, just how I like it. They didn't know that by tearing that paper I wasn't surrendering. I was showing them exactly how much respect I had for their little scheme. 0. I finished my coffee and went upstairs to my study. I locked the door and sat at my desk. I texted Harrison. Papers served. Hearing is Friday. Proceed with the asset freeze on Thursday night, giving them exactly 24 hours to feel rich. And Harrison checked the cameras in the living room. I think we are about to have a party. I was right. By 6 o'clock, the sun had gone down and the character of my house had changed. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a club. Marcus had invited friends, not close friends, Not people who cared about him, but the kind of friends you buy. The leeches, the hangers-on, the people who show up when the liquor is free and disappear when the bill comes. I stayed in my room listening to the bass thump through the floorboards. I checked the security feed on my monitor. The living room was full. There were 20 or 30 people spilling drinks on my Persian rugs, smoking vapes that filled the air with a sickly sweet fog. Tiffany was holding court in the center of the room, wearing my wife's diamond earrings, laughing loud and shrill. Marcus was standing on the coffee table, the same mahogany table I had protected with the torn paper hours ago. He was holding a bottle of crystal, shaking it, spraying it over the crowd like he was a rapper in a music video. To the future, he screamed, his voice slurring slightly. To King Empire, King Empire! The crowd roared back, raising their glasses. I zoomed in on Marcus's face. He looked euphoric. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery without buying a ticket. He was drunk on power, drunk on the idea that he had finally defeated his father. "Hey, Marcus," someone shouted, a guy in a hoodie sitting on my Eames chair with his feet up. "When do you get the keys to the vault?" "Friday, baby," Marcus yelled, jumping down, landing heavy on the floor. "Friday morning, the judge signs the paper, and then Daddy goes to the farm and we go to the bank." The room erupted in laughter. "Yeah, send the old man to the farm, put him out to pasture." I watched them mocking me. I watched them disrespecting the house I had built with 40 years of sweat and sleepless nights. They were treating my legacy like a frat house. I felt a cold anger rising in my chest. But it wasn't the hot flash of temper. It was the cold, calculating anger of an architect spotting a flaw in the steel. I picked up my phone. I could call the police. I could have them all arrested for trespassing, for disturbing the peace. But that would be too easy. That would be a slap on the wrist. I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to feel like they owned the place, because the fall is always harder when you think you are flying. I watched Tiffany walk over to a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket. He whispered something in her ear and she giggled, handing him a small baggie from her purse. Drugs. They were bringing narcotics into my house. That changed the calculus. I sat back in my chair watching the party rage on. I typed a message to the private investigator. "We have activity. Illegal substances on the premises. Document everything I want. High-resolution shots of every face in that room, especially the suppliers. And get ready." I turned off the monitor, but I kept the audio on. I listened to Marcus bragging about how he tricked me, about how easy it was to sell the car, about how stupid I was. "My dad is a dinosaur," he said, laughing over the music. "He built skyscrapers, but he can't even use an iPad. He doesn't know what hit him." I looked at the iPad in my hand, the one controlling the entire security grid of the house. "I am not a dinosaur." "Marcus," I whispered, "I am the meteor." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the driveway. More cars were pulling up, flashy sports cars, loud engines. It was turning into a block party. Let them have their night, I thought. Let them drink my wine and trash my rugs. Let them think they have won. Because tomorrow the bill comes due, and tomorrow I show them that the dinosaur still has teeth. I went to my closet and pulled out a suit, a black suit, the one I wore to funerals. I hung it on the door. "Friday is coming. Marcus," I said to the empty room, "and you are going to be dressed for your own burial." The bass was not just a sound, it was a physical assault. It vibrated through the floorboards of my study, traveling up through the soles of my feet and rattling the antique lamp on my desk. It was 11:30 at night and my home. My sanctuary had been transformed into a nightclub for the unemployed and the ungrateful. I could smell it from upstairs. A sickly sweet mixture of vape smoke, spilled alcohol, and expensive perfume, masking the scent of desperation. I stood up from my leather chair, smoothing the front of my cardigan. I did not need a cane to walk. I was strong. I hiked 3 miles a day when I was in Switzerland, but tonight I needed the cane. It was my prop, my shield, and my weapon. I gripped the mahogany handle, feeling the familiar smooth wood against my palm. "It is time to make an appearance," I whispered to the empty room. I opened the door, and the noise hit me like a physical wave. The lyrics of a rap song about money and violence filled the hallway, mocking the elegance of the architecture I had designed. I walked to the top of the stairs and looked down. The living room was unrecognizable. There were at least 50 people down there, strangers who had never been invited into my home. They were sitting on my Italian leather sofas with their shoes on. They were using my crystal coasters as ashtrays. They were dancing on the Persian rug that my wife and I had bought in Istanbul 30 years ago, and in the center of it all was Marcus. He was standing on the coffee table, a bottle of my best champagne in one hand, shouting something unintelligible over the music. He looked sweaty, manic, and drunk on power. Tiffany was next to him, laughing, her head thrown back, playing the role of the benevolent queen of the castle. She was pointing at things, telling people to take what they wanted, treating my possessions like party favors. I took a deep breath and began my descent. Step by step, slow and deliberate, I moved down the floating staircase. I kept my face blank, a mask of confusion and frailty. I was the ghost at the feast, the old man who had wandered out of his room past his bedtime. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy consuming my liquor and destroying my peace. But as I reached the bottom landing, a hush started to spread. It rippled outward from the stairs as people saw me standing there watching them. Marcus turned around, nearly losing his balance on the table. "Dad," he shouted over the music, his eyes glassy. "Dad, come join us. We are celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the thumping bass. "The future," Marcus yelled, raising the bottle. "To the future." I didn't answer. I walked past him, heading for the kitchen. I moved slowly, shuffling my feet, letting the cane tap rhythmically against the marble floor. Tap, tap, tap. I reached the kitchen island, intending to pour myself a glass of water, just to have something to do with my hands. A young man was leaning against the counter. He was wearing a hoodie with a designer logo on it and a gold chain that looked fake. He was holding a red Solo cup, and he looked at me with a sneer. This was Jax, Marcus's best friend since high school. A man who had never held a job for more than 3 months, but always had a new business idea that required $5,000 of someone else's money. "Well, look who is up past his bedtime," Jax said, loud enough for the kitchen to hear. The crypt keeper himself. A few people laughed. Uncomfortable, nervous laughter. I poured water from the pitcher, my hand trembling slightly on purpose. "Hello, Jax," I said politely. "Enjoying the party?" Jax laughed, pushing off the counter and stepping into my personal space. He smelled of marijuana and arrogance. "Enjoying it while you can." "Right, Pops." He smirked, leaning in close. "I heard the news Marcus told us. You are punching your ticket to the funny farm, Serenity Gardens, right? Nice place, soft walls." He poked my shoulder with a finger, hard enough to be disrespectful, gentle enough to claim it was a joke. "Don't worry, old man," Jax continued. "We will take good care of the house once you are gone. Marcus is going to turn this place into a real bachelor pad. We are going to put a DJ booth right where your piano is." I looked at him. I looked at the disrespect in his eyes. I looked at Marcus, who was watching from the doorway, laughing along with his friend, letting them mock the man who paid for the roof over their heads. I took a sip of water, letting the cool liquid calm the fire in my throat. "A DJ booth," I said softly. "That sounds very lively." I turned away from Jax, dismissing him. I walked toward the wall near the refrigerator where the smart home control panel was mounted. It looked like a simple thermostat, a sleek black screen that controlled the temperature. But I designed this system myself. It controlled everything. The lights, the locks, the shutters, the alarm. I stood in front of the panel, blocking it with my body. Marcus shouted from the living room, "Hey, Dad, leave the AC alone. We like it cold in here." I looked at Marcus across the room. I saw the entitlement. I saw the waste. "I am not touching the AC, son," I said. I pressed my thumb against the biometric scanner on the side of the panel. The screen flashed green, acknowledging my print, acknowledging the master of the house. Then I tapped the icon labeled Security Protocol Alpha. It was a setting I had programmed years ago, intended for a home invasion. It was designed to lock down the house trap, the intruders, and alert the authorities. I pressed Activate. The reaction was instantaneous. Bam, bam, bam. Heavy steel security shutters slammed down over the floor-to-ceiling windows, cutting off the view of the garden, sealing the house like a vault. The sound was deafening, like gunshots echoing in the large room. The music cut out abruptly, killed by the system. Then the lights changed. The warm, ambient lighting vanished, replaced by harsh, pulsing red emergency strobes. The room was bathed in a blood-red glow, flashing rhythmically, disorienting everyone. Whoop! 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 The sirens started. It was a 120 decibel alarm designed to shatter eardrums and induce panic. It screamed through the house, bouncing off the marble floors. Pandemonium erupted. The guests screamed, dropping their drinks, shattering glass everywhere. They ran for the doors, but the electronic locks had engaged. The front door was sealed. The back door was sealed. The windows were covered in steel. They were trapped. Marcus jumped off the table, slipping on spilled champagne, crashing to the floor. He scrambled up, looking around wildly. "Dad," he screamed, covering his ears. "Dad, what did you do? Turn it off. Turn it off." I stood by the panel, calm in the chaos. The red light washed over my face, making me look like a demon in a cardigan. I shouted over the siren, acting panicked, pressing random buttons. I don't know what happened. I tried to turn up the heat and it just went crazy. "It is broken, Marcus. It is broken." People were pounding on the windows, screaming to be let out. Jax was running in circles, clutching his red cup, looking for an exit that didn't exist. Tiffany was huddled on the sofa, crying her hands over her head. Then came the second phase of the protocol. A robotic voice boomed over the intercom system. Police dispatch notified. Authorities are en route. Remain calm and stay where you are. The police were coming. The panic in the room shifted from fear of the noise to fear of the law. I saw Jax's eyes go wide. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a large plastic bag filled with white powder. He looked for a place to hide it. He ran to the potted plant in the corner and shoved it into the dirt. I saw another man throw a handgun under the sofa. They were cockroaches scattering when the light turned on, but there was nowhere to run. 3 minutes later, we saw the blue and red lights flashing through the cracks in the shutters. The sirens outside harmonized with the siren inside. I typed a code into the panel. The internal siren stopped. The red lights went solid, providing a harsh interrogation glare. The front door unlocked with a loud buzz. Police, everyone on the ground. 6 officers in tactical gear burst through the door, weapons drawn. They didn't see a party. They saw a house in lockdown full of frantic people and the smell of drugs. "Get down. Now." Marcus tried to stand up, raising his hands. "Officer, wait," he shouted. "It is my house." My dad set off the alarm by mistake. On the ground now, an officer swept Marcus's legs, kicking them out from under him. Marcus hit the floor hard, his face pressing into the rug he had been disrespecting minutes ago. Jax tried to sneak toward the back door. "Hey, you freeze!" 2 officers grabbed Jax, slamming him against the wall. They patted him down, finding a switchblade in his pocket. Then the officer looked at the plant where Jax had hidden his stash. Well, what do we have here?" the officer said, pulling out the bag of cocaine. The room was silent except for the heavy breathing of the guests and the sobbing of Tiffany. The sergeant, a man I recognized from the precinct, walked into the center of the room. He looked at the chaos, the spilled liquor, the drugs on the table, the weapon under the couch. "Who is the homeowner?" he barked. I stepped forward, leaning heavily on my cane, my hand shaking. "I am officer," I said, my voice trembling. "I am Desmond King." The sergeant looked at me. He saw a frail old man in a cardigan surrounded by thugs. He lowered his weapon. "Mr. King, are you all right? Did they hurt you?" I shook my head, eyes wide with fear. I don't know what happened, officer. I came downstairs for water, and there were all these people. They were yelling at me, pushing me. My son. Marcus, I pointed a shaking finger at Marcus, who was cuffed on the floor. He invited them. I told him not to. I told him I was tired, but he said I was just a crazy old man. And to go back to my room, I sniffled, wiping a fake tear. I tried to use the panel to call for help, but I got confused and set off the alarm. "I am so sorry. I just wanted them to leave. I was scared, officer. They were doing drugs in my kitchen." The sergeant's face hardened. He looked at Marcus with pure disgust. "Your father asked you to stop," the sergeant said to Marcus. "Dad, tell him?" Marcus screamed from the floor. "Tell him we were just having a party. It is a misunderstanding." "He is 72 years old," the sergeant shouted down at Marcus. "And you bring this trash into his house. You bring cocaine and weapons into his home." "It is not mine," Marcus wailed. "It is Jax's." "It is in your house," the sergeant said. "You are responsible." He turned to his men. "Clear them out. Start running IDs. Anyone with a warrant goes downtown. Cite the rest for trespassing and disturbing the peace. And book him." He pointed at Marcus for maintaining a disorderly house and constructive possession of narcotics. "No," Marcus screamed as they hauled him up. "No, you can't arrest me. I have a hearing on Friday. I am going to be his guardian." "Not anymore, you aren't," the sergeant said, pulling Marcus toward the door. "You can't even guard your own living room." I watched them drag my son out. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading, begging for me to intervene to tell them it was a mistake. I just stood there holding my glass of water. Tiffany was next, trying to explain to an officer that she was the lady of the house. "Ma'am, unless your name is on the deed, you are just another guest," the officer said. "Take it outside." I walked over to the sergeant. "Officer," I said, pulling a card from my pocket, "here is my lawyer's number. If you need anything, please call him. I am very shaken up. We will handle it. Mr. King," the sergeant said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder, "you go get some rest. We will lock everything up tight." "Thank you," I whispered. I watched the last of them leave. The door closed. The silence returned. I looked around the ruined living room, the stains on the rug, the broken glass. It was a mess, but it was a clean mess. I walked to the panel and typed in a new code. The shutters rolled up slowly, revealing the moon. The red lights turned off, replaced by the soft, warm glow of the evening setting. I looked at the spot where Marcus had been lying on the floor. I took a sip of water. "I told you, Marcus," I said to the empty room. "I told you." I was tired of the noise. The morning sun was too bright for a man with a hangover and a fresh criminal record. Marcus had spent the night in a holding cell surrounded by drunks and petty thieves before Tiffany managed to scrape together enough cash from her secret stash to pay the bondsman. He walked out of the precinct at 8 in the morning, smelling of stale sweat and fear. But his mind was not on his hygiene or his legal troubles. His mind was on the clock. It was 9 o'clock, the deadline. Russo, the actor playing the role of the angry collector, had given him until noon to return the $300,000 or face the wrath of the mob. Marcus was vibrating with panic. He needed cash. He needed it fast, and he needed a lot of it. He drove his Porsche to the First National Bank downtown. It was the main branch, the one with the marble columns and the high ceilings, the one where I had kept my primary accounts for 40 years. Marcus walked in wearing sunglasses to hide his bloodshot eyes, clutching a leather portfolio under his arm. Inside that portfolio was his golden ticket, a durable power of attorney document granting him full access to my finances. It was a forgery, of course. He had cut and pasted my signature from an old birthday card onto a legal template he downloaded from a website. He thought it was foolproof. He thought that because I was old and because the document looked official, the bank would just hand over the keys to the vault. I was not there. I was sitting in my kitchen eating oatmeal and watching the security feed from the bank on my iPad. I have been a premium client at First National for 3 decades. I designed their regional headquarters. The branch manager is a man named Percival, who plays golf with me every Sunday. We had a very interesting conversation yesterday afternoon. I watched on the screen as Marcus approached the teller counter. He didn't go to the regular line. He went to the private wealth management window, the one reserved for clients with 7 figures or more. The teller was Ms. Gable, a stern woman with glasses on a chain who had been handling my deposits since Marcus was in diapers. She knew me, she knew my wife, and she knew exactly what Marcus was. I turned up the volume on the iPad. "Good morning, Ms. Gable," Marcus said, trying to charm her, trying to flash that smile that used to get him out of trouble in high school. "I am here to make a withdrawal on behalf of my father, Desmond King." Ms. Gable looked at him over the rim of her spectacles. She didn't smile. "Mr. King is not with you?" she asked. Her voice was dry, crisp, like counting fresh banknotes. "He is not feeling well." Marcus lied smoothly, leaning on the counter, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He had a bit of an episode last night. Confusion, you know. We are getting his affairs in order, handling the medical bills. I have the power of attorney right here." He slid the forged document across the marble counter with a flourish. "I need to withdraw $50,000 in cash," Marcus said, "and I need to transfer another $250,000 to this account number." He slid a second piece of paper over. It was the routing number for his offshore gambling account disguised as a medical holding company. Ms. Gable picked up the document. She looked at it for a long time. She held it up to the light. She ran her thumb over the signature. I watched Marcus sweating. He was tapping his foot on the floor, a nervous rhythm that echoed in the quiet bank. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked, his voice tight. "Just verifying the notary seal." "Mr. King," Mrs. Gable said without looking up. "Standard procedure for third-party transactions." She turned to her computer and began to type. The sound of her keystrokes was loud. Clack, 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 like a judge's gavel hitting the block. Marcus looked at his watch. It was 9:15. He had less than 3 hours. Ms. Gable stopped typing. She frowned at the screen. She typed again, harder this time. "Is there a problem?" Marcus asked, sweat now beading on his forehead. Ms. Gable looked up. Her face was unreadable. "Mr. King, I am afraid I cannot process this transaction." Marcus laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "What do you mean you can't process it? The money is there. I saw the balance yesterday. It is over $2 million. Ms. Gable turned the monitor slightly so Marcus couldn't see it. "The balance is not the issue, Mr. King," she said coldly. "The issue is the status of the account. As of 8:30 this morning, the risk management algorithm flagged your father's accounts for suspicious activity." "Suspicious activity," Marcus stammered. "What kind of activity?" "Internal fraud," Ms. Gable said. Her eyes locked onto his. The system detected an unauthorized attempt to access the secure vault credentials, followed by a series of irregular login attempts from an unrecognized device. And given the large sum you are requesting, combined with a power of attorney document that was not filed in our presence, the system has initiated a protocol red, Marcus whispered. "It means a total asset freeze," Ms. Gable said. "No withdrawals, no transfers, no checks. The accounts are locked. Mr. King, pending a full forensic audit and a personal confirmation from the account holder in the presence of a federal officer." Marcus looked like he had been punched in the gut. "You locked the money," he screamed, his voice echoing off the marble walls, drawing stares from the security guards. "You can't do that. I need that money. It is an emergency. My father is sick." "If your father is sick, I suggest you take him to a hospital," Ms. Gable said, calm as a glacier. "But you are not walking out of here with his money. Not today." Marcus slammed his hand on the counter. "Call him," he shouted. "Call Desmond right now. He will tell you. He will authorize it." Ms. Gable picked up the phone slowly. She dialed my number, the one on file. I watched my phone ring on the kitchen table beside my oatmeal. It buzzed angrily, vibrating against the wood. Marcus watched Ms. Gable holding the receiver to her ear. "It is ringing," she said. I let it ring. Once, twice. 3 times. Then I reached out and pressed the red button, declining the call. "He is not answering," Ms. Gable said, hanging up. "He is probably sleeping," Marcus yelled. "He is old." "Try again." "I cannot try again." "Mr. King," Ms. Gable said, "protocol dictates that if the account holder is unreachable during a fraud alert, we must assume the worst. The freeze stands until Mr. King comes into the branch personally with identification." Marcus looked at the clock. 9:30. He grabbed the forged document off the counter, stuffing it back into his portfolio. "This is ridiculous," he spat. "You are making a mistake. I am going to sue this bank. I am going to have your job." "You are welcome to try," Ms. Gable said, turning back to her computer. "Next in line, please." Marcus stormed out of the bank looking like a man whose parachute had failed to open. I chuckled, turning off the iPad. He thought it was a computer glitch. He thought it was an algorithm. He didn't know that. At 8 a.m. sharp, I had walked into Percival's office through the back door and signed a very different set of documents. I didn't just freeze the account, I emptied it. I moved every dime, every stock, every bond out of my personal accounts. I transferred the entire liquid value of my estate, roughly $12 million, into an irrevocable blind trust. And the best part was the beneficiary. Marcus thought I was senile. He thought I was losing my mind, so I decided to do something that a crazy old man might actually do. I named the trust the Barclay Foundation. It was a charitable trust dedicated to the care and feeding of stray dogs in the greater Chicago area. Technically, I was the trustee, so I still controlled the money, but legally, the assets belonged to the dogs. If Marcus wanted to get his hands on my wealth, he would have to sue a shelter full of golden retrievers. And good luck explaining that to a jury. I finished my oatmeal and walked into the living room. I turned on the television, to a cartoon channel watching a coyote chase a roadrunner. It felt appropriate. 20 minutes later, the front door burst open. Marcus ran in, his sunglasses gone, his tie, crooked, his face a mask of pure panic. He looked wild, desperate, the kind of desperate that makes men dangerous. "Dad!" he screamed, running into the living room. "Dad, where is the money?" I looked up from the TV, blinking slowly. acting surprised, Marcus. I said, "You are back early. Did you have fun at the bank?" "Fun!" Marcus yelled. He was pacing back and forth, pulling at his hair. "They froze it, Dad. They said it was fraud. They said the account is locked. I need you to call them right now. You have to call them and tell them to release the funds." I looked at him confused. "Release what funds?" "Marcus, the money," Marcus shrieked. "The millions. The liquid cash. I need 50,000 right now, or I am dead. Dad, do you understand? Dead." I shook my head sadly. "Oh, Marcus," I said, sighing deeply. "I tried to tell you. Tell me what I tried to tell you last night." "But you were having your party," I said, looking at the remote control in my hand as if it were a complex alien device I tried to log in this morning to buy some new slippers on the internet. And Marcus asked, breathless. "And I couldn't get in," I said. I shrugged innocently. "I think I forgot the password." Marcus stopped pacing. He stared at me. "You forgot the password," he whispered. "Yes," I said. "It was something complicated. Your mother's birthday, maybe? Or was it the name of my first dog?" I tried to guess it a few times, but then the screen turned red and said something about a protocol. "You locked yourself out," Marcus screamed. "You locked us out. You triggered the fraud alert because you can't remember a 4-digit PIN, I suppose so," I said, looking back at the TV, watching the coyote fall off a cliff. "It is very confusing technology these days." Marcus fell to his knees on the rug. He put his head in his hands. "Do you know the recovery questions?" he asked. His voice muffled by his palms, I thought. For a moment I think one of them was, "What is your favorite city?" I said. "And what did you answer?" Marcus asked, looking up, hope flickering in his eyes. "I don't remember," I said. "I like so many cities. Paris is nice. London has good bridges. Chicago is my home. I think I might have typed Honolulu, but I am not sure." Marcus let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. "We are ruined," he moaned. "We are absolutely ruined. Russo is going to kill me. The lawyer won't take the case without a retainer. The house is going to be seized." He looked at me with hatred, pure, unadulterated hatred. "You useless old man," he hissed. "You and your senile brain. You just destroyed everything." I looked at him. I looked at the son I had raised, the son who was currently wishing I was dead so he could have the password. "I am sorry, Marcus," I said, my voice flat, devoid of apology. "I guess you will have to find another way to pay your debts. Maybe you can get a job." "A job?" Marcus laughed, a hysterical, broken sound. "I need 303 grand by noon, Dad. I can't get that flipping burgers." "Then I suggest you start running," I said. Turning the volume up on the cartoon, Marcus stood up. He looked at the TV, then at me. He realized there was no money coming from me. There was no bailout. There was no safety net. He turned and ran out of the house, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. I watched him go. I picked up my phone and opened the banking app, the one that was linked to the new trust account. Balance, $12,400,000. I transferred $500 to the local animal shelter with a note purely for my own amusement. For the dogs, I typed. I looked at the TV. The coyote had just been crushed by a falling anvil. I took a sip of my tea. "Beep, beep," I whispered. The doorbell did not ring. It screamed. It was held down by a heavy, impatient thumb continuously buzzing like a flatline on a heart monitor echoing through the foyer of the house I built. It was 12 o'clock exactly, the deadline. I was sitting in the library, the door cracked open just an inch. Sipping my tea and waiting for the second act of my play to begin, I heard the heavy footsteps on the porch, the pounding of a fist against the solid oak door. It sounded like the police or the mob, or perhaps simply the inevitable consequences of a life lived without honor. Finally coming to collect Marcus was in the living room, pacing, wearing a path into my Persian rug. He looked like a man on the edge of a breakdown. His hair was disheveled, his shirt untucked, and he was sweating profusely despite the air conditioning, humming at 68 degrees. Tiffany was sitting on the sofa, filing her nails, pretending to be bored, pretending that the world was not collapsing around them. "Open the door, Marcus," whispered his voice high and thin with terror. "He is here. Russo is here." He looked at Tiffany, begging her to move. "You open it," Tiffany snapped, not looking up. "It is your mess, Marcus." The pounding got louder. "I will kick it down," a voice roared from outside, deep and gravelly. "I know you are in there, Marcus. Open up or I am calling the feds." Marcus flinched as if he had been struck. He ran to the door, his hands shaking so badly he fumbled with the lock, dropping the deadbolt with a loud clack. He pulled the door open and Silas stepped inside. Silas was the actor I had hired, a man who usually played Shakespeare in the park, but today he was playing the role of a lifetime. He was Russo, the aggrieved private collector. He was wearing a black leather jacket that creaked when he moved, and his face was set in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He looked big. He looked mean. And most importantly, he looked like a man who would break your legs for a parking violation. "Where is my money, Marcus?" Silas shouted, stepping into the foyer, forcing Marcus to stumble backward. Marcus held up his hands, palms out, a universal gesture of surrender. "Mr. Russo, please listen. I can explain." Marcus stammered, backing away until he hit the hallway table, knocking over a vase. "Explain," Silas barked, throwing a thick envelope onto the floor at Marcus's feet. It landed with a heavy thud. "Explain this." Marcus looked at the envelope. "I took that to a mechanic this morning." Silas yelled, his voice booming off the vaulted ceiling. "I had him check the VIN. I had him check the engine block casting numbers. You know what he told me? He told me that car is a fake. He told me it is a Mustang GT with a body kit glued onto it. It is a replica. Marcus, a $40,000 toy that you sold me for 300 grand. Marcus went pale. His skin turned the color of old ash. I didn't know." Marcus lied, his eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a miracle. "My father said it was real. He told me it was the Shelby don't." "You blame your father!" Silas shouted, stepping closer, towering over my son. "You signed the title. Marcus, you took the cash. That is fraud. That is grand larceny. That is selling counterfeit goods across state lines. Do you know what the sentence is for that in this state? 10 years, Marcus. 10 years in federal prison, rubbing shoulders with murderers and rapists. 10 years. Marcus squeaked, his knees giving out. He collapsed onto the bottom step of the staircase, clutching the banister like a lifeline. "Please, Mr. Russo, I swear I didn't mean to scam you. I spent the money. I don't have it right now, but I can get it. Give me a week. Just 1 week. I gave you until noon," Silas said, checking his heavy gold watch. "It is 12:01. The time for talking is over. I am calling the police. I am pressing charges, and I am going to sue you for every dime you have, every dime your wife has, and every dime your daddy has." He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen. "No!" Marcus screamed, scrambling across the floor on his hands and knees, grabbing Silas's leg. "No, please don't call the cops. My life is over if you call them. I have a record. They will bury me, then pay me." Silas kicked his leg free. "Pay me my money plus interest for the insult, or you go to jail right now." Marcus turned to Tiffany. She was standing by the sofa watching the scene with wide eyes, clutching her purse. "Tiff," Marcus begged, crawling toward her. "Tiff, help me. Give him the jewelry. Give him the cash from the safe. The emergency fund. Please, Tiff. He is going to send me to prison." Tiffany looked at Marcus, groveling on the floor. She looked at Silas, who was radiating danger. She looked at her manicured nails. "I don't have any money, Marcus," she said, her voice cold and flat. "What?" Marcus stared at her, stunned. "You have the necklace, you have the rings, you have the cash we took from the account." "I spent it," Tiffany lied smoothly. "I paid off my student loans. I sent some to my mother. It is gone, Marcus. And the jewelry is fake, just like your car. Pawned the real stuff years ago. It was a lie, of course. She had a stash of cash hidden in the lining of her suitcase, I knew, because I had seen her hide it on the hidden cameras. But she wasn't going to waste her escape fund on a sinking ship. "You are lying," Marcus screamed. "You are lying to save yourself. You are the criminal, Marcus." Tiffany spat, stepping back, revulsion on her face. "Don't drag me into your fraud. I didn't sign the title. You did. If you go to jail, that is your problem." Marcus looked at her, seeing his wife for the first time, seeing the predator underneath the makeup. He looked at Silas, who was dialing 3 digits on his phone. 9-1. "Wait!" Marcus screamed, tears streaming down his face. Wait. I decided it was time. I opened the library door and stepped out, leaning heavily on my cane, acting confused and frail, squinting against the light. What is all this shouting? I asked, my voice tremulous, playing the part of the disturbed old man. I am trying to nap. Marcus, who is this man? Why? Is he yelling? Marcus looked up, hope flickering in his eyes, a desperate, wild hope. Dad, he choked out. Dad, help me. This is Mr. Russo, the man I sold the car to. He says it is a fake, Dad. He says you tricked me. I looked at Silas. He stopped dialing, holding the phone up like a weapon. You are Desmond King? Silas asked, his voice lowering slightly, showing a mock respect for the elder I am, I said, shuffling forward. I built this house. Who are you, sir? I am the man your son swindled, Silas said. He sold me a kit car for the price of a classic, and now he says he spent the money. If I don't get $300,000 right now, I am sending him to prison. I looked at Marcus. He was sobbing openly now, a grown man reduced to a puddle of fear. Is this true? Marcus, I asked softly. You spent the money. Yes, Dad. I am sorry. I spent it all. Please help me. He is going to call the police. I sighed, a deep rattling sigh, leaning on my cane with both hands, looking like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I cannot let my son go to prison, I said quietly. It would break his mother's heart if she were alive. I looked at Silas. Sir, if I settle this debt, will you leave my house? Will you agree not to press charges? Silas looked at me, assessing the situation, playing the greedy shark. If you pay me the full amount right now, cash or certified check, I will walk away, but I want it now. I nodded slowly. I don't have cash, I said, patting my pockets, but I can authorize a transfer form, my emergency account. It is the only one I have left that isn't frozen. Marcus gasped. Dad, you would do that. You would save me. I looked at him with sad, tired eyes. You are my son, Marcus, I said. I have to protect you, even when you are a fool. I reached into the inside pocket of my cardigan. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and a gold fountain pen. I need to document this, I said, my hands shaking slightly. I need to make sure the bank understands this is a legitimate transaction to resolve a legal dispute so they don't flag it as fraud again. I unfolded the paper. It was a single sheet of dense legal text, typing single-spaced. Marcus, I need you to sign this, I said, holding it out to him. It is an authorization form. It tells the bank that you accept responsibility for the transaction and that the debt is settled. It clears me of any liability so the freeze can be lifted. Marcus didn't read it. He couldn't read it through his tears and his panic. He saw a lifeline. He saw a way out of the cage. Give it to me, he said, snatching the pen. Give it to me. I will sign anything. He didn't look at the header, which read, Sworn Affidavit of Confession. He didn't read the first paragraph, which stated, I, Marcus King, hereby confess to the theft of property belonging to Desmond King, specifically. 1. 1967, Shelby, replica. He didn't read the second paragraph, which stated, I admit to selling said property under false pretenses, committing fraud against the buyer. He didn't read the final clause, which stated, I waive all rights to inheritance and accept full legal responsibility for my actions. He just saw the line at the bottom marked signature. He scribbled his name, Marcus King, pressing so hard the pen tore the paper slightly. There he panted, handing it back to me. It is signed, Dad. Fix it. Please just fix it. I took the paper. I looked at the signature. It was valid. It was witnessed by me, witnessed by Tiffany, and witnessed by the man he had defrauded. I folded the paper carefully, slipping it into my breast pocket, patting it to make sure it was safe. I stood up straighter. My stoop vanished. My hand stopped shaking. I looked at Silas. Mr. Russo, I said, my voice changing, dropping the frailty, becoming the voice of the man who commanded construction crews for 40 years. Yes. Mr. King? Silas asked, confused by the shift. You have your document. The debt is acknowledged. Now get out of my house. Silas blinked, acting surprised at my sudden strength. But the money, he stammered. You said you would authorize the transfer. I said I would resolve the dispute. I said I resolved it. My son has confessed. The matter is now between him and the authorities whenever I choose to call them. But as for you, sir, you are trespassing. I took a step forward, raising my cane, not as a crutch, but as a baton. Leave, I boomed, my voice echoing in the foyer, or I will call the police myself, and I don't think you want to explain why you are shouting at a senior citizen in his own home. Silas looked at Marcus, then at me. He threw his hands up. Fine, he shouted. You are all crazy. Keep the damn car. I don't want the trouble, but if I see him on the street, he is dead meat. Silas turned and stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the glass rattled in the panes. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus sat on the stairs, hyperventilating, wiping sweat from his face. He looked at me with pure adoration, believing I had just bought his freedom. "Oh my God," he whispered, collapsing back against the steps. "Thank you, Dad. Thank you. You saved me." I thought. Was dead. He looked at Tiffany, who was standing by the couch, pale and shaken. "Did you see that?" Marcus laughed hysterically. "He kicked him out. Dad kicked him out. We are safe, baby. We are safe." I looked at Marcus. I looked at the pen in my hand. I walked over to the mirror in the hallway and adjusted my collar. "You are safe from him, Marcus," I said quietly. "But you just signed your confession." Marcus didn't hear me. He was too busy celebrating his survival. He was too busy hugging Tiffany, who looked like she wanted to vomit. I walked back toward the library. I touched the pocket where the paper lay against my heart. "You are not safe from me, son." I thought. Phase 3 is complete. The rat has entered the cage, and he just locked the door from the inside. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. It was a smell I knew well from 40 years of zoning hearings and contract disputes, but today the air felt heavier, thick with the humidity of betrayal. I sat at the defendant's table looking like a man who had lost his way. My gray cardigan was buttoned wrong on purpose. My hand gripped the cane with a tremor that I had practiced in the mirror for an hour. The courtroom was packed mostly with people. Marcus and Tiffany had invited friends they wanted to impress with their new status as the guardians of the King estate. They sat in the back row whispering and giggling like they were at a movie premiere waiting for the main character to die. Marcus sat at the plaintiff's table wearing a black suit that looked somber and respectful. He had his head bowed, playing the role of the heartbroken son, forced to do the unthinkable for the love of his father. Tiffany sat behind him, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief looking like the picture of supportive grief. The judge was a woman named Honorable Margaret Vance. She had eyes like flint and a reputation for hating wasted time. She looked over her glasses at the assembly and banged her gavel once, a sharp crack that silenced the room. "We are here to hear the petition for emergency conservatorship over the person and estate of Mr. Desmond King, filed by his son, Marcus King. Let us proceed." Marcus's lawyer stood up. He was a man named Mr. Fletcher, a slippery character with a cheap suit and a voice that sounded like gravel crunching under tires. "Your Honor," Fletcher began pacing in front of the bench. "We are here today with heavy hearts. My client, Mr. Marcus King, loves his father dearly, but as the medical evidence will show, Mr. Desmond King is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. He is suffering from rapid onset dementia, paranoia, and reckless financial behavior. He is a danger to himself and his estate." I stared at the table, letting my mouth hang open slightly, watching a fly land. On the wood, I did not swat it. I let Fletcher paint his picture of a senile old man who needed a keeper. "We call Dr. Leonard Stein to the stand," Fletcher announced. The double doors opened and Dr. Stein walked in. He walked with the confidence of a man who thinks he owns the room. He was wearing a fresh suit likely bought with the bribe money Tiffany had given him. He took the stand, placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The lie started before he even sat down. Dr. Stein Fletcher asked, "Can you please state your professional opinion regarding Mr. King's mental state?" Dr. Stein adjusted his glasses, looking at me with a sad clinical detachment. "In my professional opinion," Dr. Stein said, his voice smooth and practiced, "Mr. Desmond King is suffering from advanced frontotemporal dementia. He exhibits severe memory loss, confusion, and aggressive outbursts. During my examination, he could not recall the current year or draw a simple clock face. He believes his house is collapsing due to structural failure, which is a classic delusion of architectural grandeur turning inward. He is mentally incompetent." "Your Honor." Marcus wiped a tear from his eye. nodding solemnly. Tiffany reached out and squeezed his shoulder, a perfect tableau of familial concern. And regarding his finances, Fletcher pressed. He is reckless, Dr. Stein continued. He squandered hundreds of thousands of dollars on impulse purchases. He sold a valuable vehicle for a fraction of its worth because he was confused about the currency. He is vulnerable to scams and exploitation. If left unchecked, he will bankrupt himself in a month. The judge made a note, her pen scratching loudly on the paper. She looked at me with pity. Thank you, Dr. Stein, she said. You may step down. The doctor stood up, smoothing his jacket, ready to walk out of there and cash his check. Wait. The word came from beside me. It was Harrison, my lawyer, my friend, and the man who was holding the detonator to the bomb I had built. Harrison stood up, buttoning his jacket. He didn't look like a high-priced shark. He looked like a grandfather, but he had eyes that could cut glass. Your Honor, Harrison said, his voice deep and resonant. Before you make a ruling, the defense would like to present a rebuttal. We have some digital evidence that we believe sheds a different light on the doctor's testimony. Fletcher jumped up. Objection. This is a surprise submission. We haven't seen this evidence. It is rebuttal. Evidence, Counselor Harrison said calmly. Admissible to impeach a witness, and given the gravity of stripping a man of his civil rights, I believe the court should see it. Judge Vance looked at Harrison, then at me. She saw something in my eyes, maybe a flicker of the old architect, maybe just the defiance of a man refusing to go gently. I will allow it, she said. Make it quick. Counselor, Harrison walked to the center of the room. He placed a laptop on the evidence table and connected it to the large monitors mounted on the walls of the courtroom. Please watch the screens, Harrison said. The room went dim as the lights were lowered. The first video flickered to life. It was grainy, taken from a long-distance lens, but the faces were clear. It was the parking lot of the apartment complex I had visited. The timestamp was from 3 days ago. On screen, Tiffany King stood next to her Mercedes. She was handing a thick white envelope to a man. The camera zoomed in. The man opened the envelope, revealing a stack of $100 bills. Then the camera panned. Walking out of the shadows of the apartment building was Dr. Leonard Stein. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was wearing casual clothes, looking nervous. He took the envelope from the man and shook his hand. Then he walked over to Tiffany and they exchanged a nod. The audio was faint, but readable subtitles appeared on the screen. Tiffany. Make sure the report says dementia. Make it irreversible. Stein. For 50 grand. Mrs. King. I will say he thinks he is Napoleon. Courtroom erupted. Gasps filled the air like balloons popping. Dr. Stein froze halfway to his seat, his face draining of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Marcus spun around, looking at Tiffany, who had gone rigid, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. Harrison didn't stop. He pressed a key. The second video played. This one was high definition, crisp and clear. It was from the security camera in my garage. The timestamp was 5 days ago. Marcus and Tiffany stood by the hood of my Shelby GT 500. The real one, or so they thought. They were counting stacks of cash. Marcus, we are rich, baby. 300 large. Tiffany, the old man won't even notice. He is too busy looking at blueprints. We sell the car, we pay off Vinny, and we use the rest to buy the doctor. Marcus, what if he finds out Tiffany? Who is he going to tell? He is senile. Remember? The audio echoed in the silent courtroom, mocking the solemnity of the proceedings. The jury, if there had been one, would have convicted them on the spot, but this was a bench hearing, and Judge Vance looked like she was about to explode. Harrison pressed the key one last time. The third video appeared. It was from yesterday, in my library. It showed Marcus crawling on the floor, begging me to save him from Silas. It showed him crying, admitting he stole the car, admitting he committed fraud. Then it showed the document, the affidavit. I watched myself on screen, handing Marcus the pen. Desmond, you have to sign this to authorize the transfer. Marcus, give it to me. I will sign anything. The camera zoomed in on the document as Marcus signed it. The header was clearly visible. Sworn, confession of theft and fraud. Harrison paused the video on the final frame. Marcus's signature, bold and desperate. Harrison turned to the judge. Your Honor, Harrison said, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. Dr. Stein testified that my client cannot draw a clock or remember the year. Yet the evidence shows a man capable of documenting a conspiracy, uncovering bribery, and securing a confession from his own son. Harrison pointed at Dr. Stein, who was now trembling so hard his knees were knocking together. Dr. Stein is not here to give a medical opinion. He is here because he was paid $50,000 of Mr. King's stolen money to perjure himself. And Marcus King is not here to protect his father. He is here to finish robbing him. Judge Vance stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor, sounding like a gunshot. She looked at Dr. Stein. Her eyes were blazing. "Dr. Stein," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You are in my courtroom, lying under oath, conspiring to strip a citizen of his rights. I can explain," Dr. Stein stammered, sweat pouring down his face. "It is a deep fake. It is Bailiff," the judge shouted. "Arrest this man immediately for perjury, conspiracy, and fraud." Two bailiffs moved in, flanking Dr. Stein. They grabbed his arms, pulling him out of the witness box. He didn't fight. He couldn't. His legs had given out. He was dragged away, screaming that he was framed, that he was forced. Click. Click. The sound of handcuffs latching onto his wrists was the sweetest music I had heard in years. The judge turned her gaze to the plaintiff's table. Marcus was shaking visibly. Shaking. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. He realized the game was over. He realized that the old man in the cardigan had been playing him the entire time. Tiffany tried to stand up, trying to sneak toward the exit. "Sit down, Mrs. King," the judge roared, "or I will hold you in contempt." Tiffany collapsed back into her chair, sobbing loudly, covering her face with her hands. Judge Vance looked at Marcus. "Mr. King," the judge said, "you filed this petition claiming your father was incompetent. It seems the only incompetence here is your own. You have wasted the court's time, you have abused the legal system, and you have betrayed your family." She picked up the file. The petition Marcus had signed and ripped it in half. Petition denied with prejudice. The judge threw the pieces of paper onto the floor. "And Mr. King," she added, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office. Based on the video evidence of theft, forgery, and elder abuse, I suggest you do not leave town." She banged the gavel. Case closed. The sound of the gavel was final, absolute. I stood up slowly. I didn't need the cane anymore. I straightened my back, pushing my shoulders down, letting the frailty drop away like a costume. I unbuttoned the cardigan, revealing the sharp tailored shirt underneath. I looked across the aisle at my son. He was staring at the floor, broken, defeated. I looked at Tiffany, who was weeping into her hands, ruining her makeup. Harrison closed the laptop with a snap. "Ready to go, Des?" Harrison asked, smiling. I looked at the judge, who nodded at me with respect. "Yes, Harrison," I said, my voice strong and clear. "Let's go get some lunch. I am starving." I walked out of the courtroom, striding down the center aisle. The people in the gallery parted for me, staring in awe at the architect who had just brought the house down. I didn't look back at Marcus. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where he was going, and it wasn't to a bank. The gavel had banged, but the echo was still bouncing around the mahogany walls of the courtroom. Dr. Stein was being led out in handcuffs, his career in ruins, his future reduced to a series of legal battles he would inevitably lose. The judge was stacking her papers, ready to move on to the next case, ready to dismiss the tragedy of the King family as just another sad story of greed. But I was not done. I stood up again. My lawyer Harrison placed a hand on my arm, signaling that we had won, that we should leave while we were ahead. But I shook him off. I had dismantled the doctor. I had exposed the conspiracy. But there was one loose thread. One final lesson that my son needed to learn before the cell door closed on him. "Your Honor," I said, my voice projecting to the back of the room without shouting, "I have one final clarification regarding the assets in question." Judge Vance looked over her spectacles. She was tired, but she respected the way I carried myself. "Mr. King, the petition has been denied. You are free to go. What more is there to say?" "It concerns the vehicle," I said, walking slowly toward the railing, the 1967 Shelby GT 500 that my son admitted to selling. He claims he sold it for $300,000 to a private collector. Marcus looked up from the table. His face was a mask of misery. He thought I was going to rub it in. He thought I was going to lament the loss of my beloved Eleanor. "Yes," the judge said, checking her notes. "The theft of the vehicle is being referred to the district attorney. It is a grand larceny charge, Mr. King. We are aware of the value. That is just it." "Your Honor," I said, leaning on my cane, looking directly at Marcus, "I want the court and the district attorney to be clear on exactly what was stolen. Because if you charge him with stealing an $800,000 car, the charge will not stick. The room went quiet. Marcus frowned, confusion cutting through his panic. "What are you talking about?" Marcus muttered. "It was the Shelby I sold." "The Shelby?" I turned to him, smiling a small, sad smile. "No, Marcus, you didn't." I looked back at the judge. "Your Honor, the car that was parked in my garage, the car that my son stole and sold to a third party, was not a 1967 Shelby GT 500. It was a replica." A collective gasp went through the gallery. "A replica," the judge repeated. "Yes," I said. "I love the original. Eleanor too much to let her sit in a garage where the humidity fluctuates, where mice might chew the wiring. I donated the real Shelby to the Peterson Automotive Museum in Los Angeles 2 years ago. It is currently sitting on a turntable in their main exhibit hall, protected by bulletproof glass and 24-hour security." I paused, letting the information sink in. "The car in my garage was a kit car." I continued. "It was built on a 1990 Ford Mustang chassis. I bought the kit online for $12,000. I spent another $8,000 on the paint and the interior to make it look authentic. It was a project. Car A toy I used for Sunday drives to get ice cream. It had a fiberglass body and a crate engine." I looked at Marcus. "You sold a $20,000 Ford Mustang with a body kit for $300,000. Marcus's mouth fell open. He looked like a fish gasping for air on a dock. "No," he whispered. "No, that is impossible. It looked real. It sounded real. It sounded real because I installed a customized exhaust system." I said, "But if you had ever bothered to open the hood, Marcus, if you had ever taken 5 minutes to learn about the things I loved, you would have seen the difference. You would have seen the modern alternator. You would have seen the fuel injection system instead of carburetors. But you didn't look, did you? You just saw a dollar sign." I turned back to the judge. "So, Your Honor, my son did not steal an $800,000 asset. He stole a $20,000 used car." Marcus started to laugh. It was a hysterical, broken sound, hope flooding back into his eyes. "Did you hear that?" he shouted, jumping up, pointing at his lawyer. "Did you hear that? It was a replica. It was a cheap knockoff. The value is only 20 grand. That drops the charge. It is not grand larceny in the first degree anymore. It is a lower-class felony, maybe even a misdemeanor, if we argue depreciation." He looked at Tiffany, grabbing her arm. "We are saved, Tiff. It is just a petty theft charge. I can plead that down. I can get probation." Tiffany looked at him, then she looked at me. She saw the look in my eye. She saw that I hadn't played this card to save him. Harrison stood up, then clearing his throat. "Actually, Your Honor," Harrison said, his voice cutting through Marcus's celebration, "I believe the defendant is missing the point of the law." Marcus froze. "What point?" Harrison picked up a law book from the table, thumbing through the pages casually. "If you had stolen the car and kept it," Harrison said, looking at Marcus, "the charge would indeed be based on the actual value of the item, roughly $20,000. A slap on the wrist, essentially." Harrison snapped the book shut. "But you didn't keep it. Marcus, you sold it. You represented it as a genuine 1967 Shelby GT 500 to a buyer. You provided forged documentation claiming it was authentic, and you accepted $300,000 in cash based on that lie." Harrison turned to the judge. "That is not just theft, Your Honor. That is fraud by deception. It is obtaining property by false pretenses. And because the transaction crossed state lines and involved a sum over $100,000, it is a federal crime." The blood drained from Marcus's face so fast I thought he was going to faint. "He didn't just steal from his father," Harrison continued. "He defrauded the buyer, Mr. Russo. He sold a counterfeit good for 15 times its value, that $300,000 he pocketed. That is the proceeds of fraud." The judge nodded, her face grim. "Mr. Harrison is correct," she said, looking at Marcus. "You are not just facing charges for stealing the car. Mr. King, you are facing charges for swindling the buyer. You took $300,000 for a $20,000 item. That is a Class 1 felony. The mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines are actually harsher than if you had just stolen the real car." Marcus gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "But I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought it was real. I didn't mean to scam him." "Ignorance of the nature of the stolen goods is not a defense for fraud," the judge said coldly. "You represented it as real. You forged a title saying it was real. You profited as if it were real. The law judges you on your intent and your gain. You gained $300,000 illegally. I stepped forward again, looking at my son. And there is one more thing, Marcus, I said softly. He looked at me, his eyes filled with tears and terror. The buyer, I said. Mr. Russo. He thinks he bought a classic. He thinks he has an $800,000 car in his possession. When he finds out it is a fake, when he takes it to a mechanic and realizes he paid a fortune for a fiberglass toy, he is not going to be happy. Marcus remembered Silas. He remembered the leather jacket, the shouting, the threat of violence. He remembered the deadline. He is going to kill me, Marcus whispered, the words barely audible. He is going to kill me, Dad. He is a mobster. He said he would break my legs. I shrugged, adjusting my cufflink. Well, I said, you better hope the police get to you before Mr. Russo does, because the police will only put you in a cell. Mr. Russo might put you in the trunk of that replica. Marcus spun around to his lawyer, grabbing his lapels. You have to get me into protective custody, he screamed. You have to get me arrested. Right now, I want to go to jail. Take me to the precinct. I confess to everything. Just don't let Russo find me. The lawyer peeled Marcus's hands off his suit, looking at him with disgust. Get a hold of yourself, the lawyer hissed. I looked at Tiffany. She was sitting very still, staring at the wall. She realized that the money she had spent, the jewelry, the Porsche, it was all bought with the proceeds of a massive fraud. The forensic accountants would be coming for everything. She would be stripped bare. I walked over to the plaintiff's table, leaning down so only Marcus could hear me. You sold my car for pennies on the dollar, I whispered, because you didn't know its value. You sold your soul for a lifestyle you didn't earn because you didn't know your own value, and now you are going to pay the full price for both. I straightened up and looked at the judge. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. I believe the district attorney has everything they need now. The judge nodded. Bailiff, take Mr. King into custody. The district attorney is waiting downstairs. 2 officers moved toward Marcus. He didn't fight them. He didn't run. He held his hands out eagerly, wanting the handcuffs, wanting the safety of the steel bracelets. Take me away, he was babbling. Take me away. Before he finds me, I watched them lead him out. He looked small. He looked pathetic. He was a man who had tried to play chess with a grandmaster and didn't even realize the board was rigged. I turned to Harrison. Let's go, I said. Harrison packed up his briefcase, shaking his head. You really donated the real Shelby to a museum? He asked quietly as we walked down the aisle. I smiled, winking at him. No, I said. It is in a storage unit in Arizona. But he doesn't need to know that. Does he? Harrison laughed, a deep rumbling sound. Remind me never to play poker with you, Des. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright, blinding sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. But as I stood on the steps watching the police car pull away with my son in the back, I didn't feel happy. I felt a heavy, hollow ache in my chest. I had won the war, but I had lost the peace. I took out my phone and dialed the actor. Silas. It is done, I said into the phone. The rat is in the trap. You can drop the act now. Silas. Copy that, Mr. King. Silas said, his voice cheerful and light, shedding the Russo persona. Good luck with the kid. He is not a kid anymore, I said, hanging up. He is a convict. The courtroom air was thick with the dust of a collapsing empire. My son Marcus was standing by the defense table, his wrists in handcuffs, his face a mask of absolute ruin. He looked like a man who had been stripped of his skin, leaving only the raw nerves exposed. He was waiting to be taken away to be processed for fraud and grand larceny, terrified of a mobster who didn't exist, and a prison sentence that very much did. But the demolition was not finished yet. There was one more pillar standing, one more structural support that needed to be knocked out before the whole rot could be cleared away. Tiffany. She sat in the front row, her knuckles white as she gripped her designer handbag, the bag bought with my money, the bag that held the secrets of her betrayal. She was watching Marcus being cuffed, and I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was calculating the odds. She was running the numbers just like a cold-hearted actuary trying to decide if the liability was worth the asset. She decided it wasn't, Your Honor. Tiffany screamed, jumping to her feet. Her voice was shrill, shattering the somber mood of the court. I want to make a statement. I am a victim here. The judge looked up, startled by the outburst. The bailiffs moved a step closer, their hands resting on their belts. Sit down, Mrs. King, the judge ordered. This is not your hearing. No, I won't sit down, Tiffany yelled, pointing a manicured finger at her husband, at the man she had promised to love and cherish for richer or for poorer. You have to listen to me. I didn't know anything about the car. I didn't know about the forgery. Marcus lied to me. He told me his father gave it to him. He told me it was a gift. Marcus spun around the chains on his wrists, clinking softly. He stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the water. Tiff, he whispered. What are you doing? He forced me, Tiffany cried, tears streaming down her face. Now practiced theatrical tears that she could summon on command. He is abusive. Your Honor, he has a gambling problem. He owes money to dangerous people. He threatened me. He said if I didn't help him spend the cash, if I didn't help him set up the doctor's appointments, he would hurt me. I was terrified for my life. The courtroom went silent. The press in the back row started typing furiously, sensing a new angle to the tragedy, the beautiful wife trapped by the criminal husband. It was a compelling narrative. It was a lie, but it was compelling. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time in his life I saw the boy inside. The man break. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was the heartbreak of a man realizing that the woman he sold his soul for was the one holding the knife. Tiff, Marcus choked out, his voice breaking. How can you say that? We did this together. You picked out the car. You picked out the necklace. You told me to sell the Shelby. Liar! Tiffany shrieked, recoiling as if he had struck her physically. You are a liar and a thief. I tried to stop you, begged you to talk to your father, but you are sick, Marcus. You are a sociopath. She turned to me, her eyes wide and pleading. Desmond, please tell them. She begged. You know me. You know I love you. I tried to protect you from him. He locked me out of the accounts. He forced me to go along with the conservatorship. He said he would put me on the street if I didn't sign the papers. I looked at her. I looked at the diamond necklace still around her throat, the tangible proof of her complicity. She was good. I had to give her that. She was a survivor, a cockroach who would crawl over the dead body of her husband to reach the safety of the baseboards. I stood up slowly, leaning on my cane. Your Honor, I said, my voice low and rumbling, catching the attention of every ear in the room. Before you consider Mrs. King's statement as fact, I believe there is one final piece of evidence that needs to be heard. The judge looked at me weary but intrigued. Mr. King, the defendant is already in custody. What more is there? It goes to the character of the witness, I said, and to the conspiracy against my estate. My lawyer has a recording. Harrison stepped forward, plugging his phone into the court's audio system. This was recorded yesterday afternoon, Harrison said calmly. It was recovered from a cloud server linked to Mrs. King's personal device. Tiffany froze. She stopped crying mid-sob. Her eyes darted to the speakers mounted on the walls. No, she whispered. Objection. You can't. Harrison pressed play. The sound of a car engine filled the courtroom, the hum of expensive tires on asphalt, then Tiffany's voice loud and clear, dripping with venom. He is such a loser, Vinny, I can't stand him anymore. A man's voice answered, rough and deep, the voice of the thug from the parking lot. So leave him. Tiff, you got the cash, right? I got 50 grand from the car sale, Tiffany said. But that is peanuts, Vinny. The real money is in the house. Once we get the old man committed, Marcus gets power of attorney. Then we sell the estate. We dump Desmond in a state-run facility, let him rot in his own filth, and we take the $5 million. And Marcus, Vinny asked. Tiffany laughed. It was a cruel, cold sound that echoed off the courtroom walls, sending a chill down the spine of everyone present. Marcus is the fall guy, baby. Once the house is sold, I am filing for divorce. I will take half the assets and leave him with the debt. He is too stupid to see it coming. He thinks we are moving to Miami together. But I am moving to Miami alone, and you are meeting me there. The recording ended with the sound of a kiss, a wet, sloppy sound of betrayal. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum where all the air had been sucked out. Marcus stood there frozen. The color had drained from his face, leaving him gray. He looked like a statue of misery. He looked at the speakers. Then he looked at Tiffany. She wasn't crying anymore. The mask had fallen. She stood there exposed, naked in her greed, staring back at him with a look of pure defiance because she knew there was no point in lying anymore. "You were going to leave me," Marcus whispered, the handcuffs rattling as his hands shook. Tiffany sneered, adjusting her necklace. "Of course I was going to leave you. Look at you." "Marcus, you are a joke. You are a 32-year-old man living on an allowance. You couldn't even sell a fake car, right? You are pathetic." Something snapped inside Marcus. It wasn't a mental snap. It was physical, a release of tension that had been building for years. He roared, a sound of pure primal rage. He lunged. He didn't care about the bailiffs. He didn't care about the judge. He moved with a speed I didn't know he possessed, fueled by the absolute destruction of his world. He threw himself across the divider separating the defendant's table from the gallery. "Marcus, no!" I shouted, but I didn't move to stop him. He crashed into Tiffany, tackling her to the floor. The bench she was sitting on toppled over with a loud crash. Her purse flew open, spilling lipstick and lies across the floor. "You witch!" Marcus screamed, his hands finding her hair, finding the expensive silk of her dress, tearing at it. "You ruined me. I gave you everything I stole for you. Get off me!" Tiffany shrieked, clawing at his face, her nails leaving bloody streaks down his cheeks. "Help me! He is killing me!" The bailiffs swarmed in a sea of uniforms and shouting, "Get off her now, Taser! Taser!" They grabbed Marcus, pulling him off his wife, but he held on. He was biting, kicking, screaming, like a wild animal caught in a trap. "I gave you everything," Marcus howled as they dragged him back. They slammed him into the wall, pinning him hard. Tiffany scrambled backward on the floor. Her dress ripped, her hair wild, her nose bleeding. She looked at him with hatred. "You are nothing," she spat, wiping blood from her lip. "You are a broke loser, just like your father." That was the wrong thing to say. The judge was standing, banging her gavel repeatedly, order screaming for order. "Arrest them both." She commanded, "Arrest everyone." 2 more officers ran in, grabbing Tiffany. She tried to fight them, swinging her bag, hitting an officer in the face. "Get your hands off me," she screamed. "I am the victim here. I am the victim. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and assault," the officer said, spinning her around and slapping cuffs on her wrists. I stood by the railing, watching the chaos. It was a tragedy, Shakespearean in its scope, a husband and wife tearing each other apart in a court of law, destroying what little dignity they had left. Marcus was crying now, slumped against the wall, held up by 2 bailiffs. He looked at me across the room. "Dad," he sobbed. "Dad, please." I looked at him. I looked at the blood on his face, the orange jumpsuit awaiting him, the ruin of his life. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel victory. I felt the heavy burden of a father who had failed to teach his son the most important lesson of all. I walked over to him, leaning on my cane. "The officers let me approach Dad," Marcus whispered. "Help me." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, a clean white linen handkerchief monogrammed with my initials. I wiped the blood from his cheek gently. "You chose her, Marcus," I said softly, "but she betrayed me." Marcus wept. "She played me, and you let her," I said. "You let her, because she told you what you wanted to hear. She told you that you deserved the world without working for it." I tucked the handkerchief into his pocket. "She is not the victim, son," I said. "And neither are you." I turned and walked away. "Officers, take them away," the judge ordered. They dragged Marcus out one door and Tiffany out the other. They were screaming at each other, cursing, blaming, promising revenge. I stood alone in the center of the courtroom, the eye of the storm. Harrison walked up to me, closing his briefcase. "Are you okay, Des?" he asked. I looked at the empty doors. "I just evicted the tenants." "Harrison," I said. "Now it is time to clean the house." The heavy steel door of the Cook County Jail does not creak, it booms. It is a sound designed to intimidate, a sound that vibrates in your chest and tells you that you have crossed a line from the world of the living into the world of the forgotten. I stood in the visitation room waiting. It was a cold, sterile box painted a shade of green that reminded me of old hospital corridors. The air smelled of industrial cleaner and unwashed bodies, a scent that no amount of ventilation could scrub away. I was wearing my charcoal suit, the one I usually reserve for board meetings or funerals. It felt appropriate today because, in a way, this was both. I was here to conduct the final business of my fatherhood, and I was here to bury the image of the son I thought I had raised. I sat on a metal stool, bolted to the floor, looking through a thick pane of scratched plexiglass. On the other side was an empty chair waiting for an occupant. I checked my watch. It was 10 in the morning. The sun was shining outside. But in here, there was no sun. Only the buzzing of fluorescent lights that flickered like a dying heartbeat. The door on the other side buzzed loudly. A heavy mechanical sound. Marcus walked in. He was not the man who had stood on my coffee table spraying champagne 2 nights ago. He was not the man who had driven a Porsche with the arrogance of a king. He was inmate number 7429. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, hanging off his frame like a sack. The fabric was coarse and cheap, a far cry from the Italian silk he used to demand. He looked terrible. His head had been shaved, a standard procedure for new intake, stripping away his styled hair, his vanity, his armor. His face was gaunt, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen from crying. He shuffled toward the chair, his ankles shackled, his wrists cuffed in front of him. He looked like a child who had been caught playing dress-up in a nightmare. He sat down, picking up the black phone receiver with trembling hands. Picked up mine. The plastic was cool against my ear. "Dad," Marcus whispered. His voice was tinny, distorted by the cheap electronics. "Dad, you came." I looked at him. I looked for the defiance. I looked for the anger. But there was nothing left. Just fear. Raw, naked fear. "I came. Marcus," I said simply. "Get me out of here." "Dad." Marcus started to cry immediately, tears tracking through the grime on his face. "You have to get me bail. The lawyer said it is set at 500,000. You have that, Dad. You have millions. Just write the check. Please, I can't stay here. These people are animals. I am scared, Dad. I am so scared." I listened to him begging. I listened to the son who had tried to declare me incompetent, who had tried to lock me away in a nursing home so he could steal my fortune. Now the tables had turned and he was the one in the cage begging for the key. "I cannot do that, Marcus," I said, my voice calm, steady. "Why not?" Marcus screamed, hitting the glass with his open palm. "Why not? I am your son. You can't leave. Me in here, I made a mistake. Okay? I messed up. But it wasn't my fault. It was Tiffany." He leaned closer, his eyes wide and desperate. "It was all her idea, Dad. She manipulated me. She told me you were losing your mind. She told me we deserved the money. She pushed me to sell the car. She pushed me to get the power of attorney. I didn't want to do it. Dad, I swear I love you." She twisted my head. "She is a witch." I watched him shift the blame like a heavy load he was too weak to carry. He was 32 years old, and he was still pointing fingers, still acting like the victim. "She forced you?" I asked. "Yes." Marcus nodded frantically. "She threatened me. She said she would leave me. She said I wasn't a man if I didn't provide for her. I did it for her, Dad. I did it to save my marriage." I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting him see the movement. I pulled out a photograph. It was a 4x6 glossy print, the one I had taken from my car across the street from the dilapidated apartment complex. I pressed the photo against the glass facing him. "Look at this, Marcus," I said. Marcus blinked, focusing his eyes on the picture. He saw Tiffany standing in the parking lot. She was leaning against her Mercedes, the one paid for with my money. She was kissing a man with tattoos and a cigarette hanging from his lip, a man who looked nothing like Marcus. "And look at her hand," I said, pointing to the envelope she was holding. Marcus squinted. "That is the money, Marcus," I said softly. "That is the cash you scraped together, the cash you thought was going to pay off Russo, the cash you begged for, the cash you stole." Marcus stared at the photo. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "She wasn't paying off a debt. Marcus," I continued, "she wasn't saving you. She was funding him. That is her boyfriend, a small-time dealer named Ray. She has been seeing him for 6 months. She took your money, the money you stole from me, and she gave it to him to pay off his debts." "No," Marcus whispered, shaking his head. "No, that is a lie. It is a photograph, son," I said. "It doesn't lie. She wasn't planning to go to Miami with you. She was planning to dump you in prison, sell my house, and run away with him. You were never the partner, Marcus. You were the mark." Marcus slumped back in his chair. The fight drained out of him. He looked at the photo, then at me. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He hadn't just been caught, he had been played. He had betrayed his father for a woman who was laughing at him behind his back. She said, "She loved me," Marcus stammered. "She loved your access." "Marcus," I said. "She loved the credit cards. She loved the house. She loved the idea of the inheritance. But she never loved you, because you can't love a man you don't respect, and you gave her no reason to respect you." Marcus looked down at his handcuffs. Shame burned his face, turning it a deep crimson. "I am sorry, Dad," he wept, his shoulders heaving. "I am so sorry. I was stupid. I was weak. Please forgive me. Get me out, and I will make it right. I will work. I will pay you back. Just don't leave me here." I looked at him. I looked at the boy I had raised, the boy I had indulged, the boy I had failed to discipline because I wanted him to have the life I never had. I sighed a deep, rattling breath that hurt my chest. "I am not angry about the car." "Marcus," I said. Marcus looked up, hopeful. "You aren't?" he asked. "No," I said. "It was just metal. It was glass and rubber and paint. I can buy another car. I can build another garage. The Shelby was a replica. Anyway, it was just a thing." I leaned closer to the glass, my eyes locking onto his. "I am angry because you sold yourself." "Marcus," I said, my voice hard as granite. "You sold your integrity. You sold your name. You sold your dignity for a woman who looked at you and saw a bank account. You let her convince you that stealing from your father was better than working for a living." "But I can change," Marcus pleaded. "I can change, Dad." "You have to change in here," I said, looking around. "The gray room. You need this, Marcus. You need to understand what it means to have nothing. You need to understand that actions have consequences that cannot be fixed with a checkbook." I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket. "I am not posting bail," I said. Marcus's eyes widened with terror. "No, Dad. Wait, you can't. I am letting you stay here," I said. "I am letting you sit in this cell and think about that photograph. Think about Tiffany laughing with her boyfriend while you are wearing that jumpsuit. Think about the man you want to be when you get out." I turned to the door. "Dad, don't go!" Marcus screamed, jumping up, slamming his fists against the glass. "Dad, please, I am your son. You can't leave me. I will die in here." I stopped my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at him one last time. "You won't die, Marcus," I said. "But the boy I raised is already dead. I am just waiting to see if a man can rise from the ashes." I opened the heavy steel door. "Dad." Marcus howled, a sound of pure animal despair echoing off the concrete walls. "Dad, come back." I stepped into the hallway and the door slammed shut behind me, cutting off his voice. Bam! The silence that followed was heavy, ringing in my ears. I walked down the long corridor, my cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor. I didn't look back. I didn't cry. I had done my crying days ago when I saw the footage of him stealing from me. I walked out into the bright sunlight of the prison yard. The air was fresh and clean, telling me that the storm was over. I had lost a son, but maybe, just maybe, I had saved a soul. Time would tell, and Marcus had plenty of time. Now I walked to my car where Harrison was waiting. "Take me home, Harrison," I said. "I have a garage to clean out." The justice system is a slow-moving beast, and sometimes it spits things out that it finds indigestible. Tiffany King was one of those things. She walked out of the county lockup 48 hours after her arrest, not in handcuffs but in a cloud of self-righteousness. She had played the victim card perfectly, blaming Marcus for everything, claiming coercion, claiming ignorance, claiming that she was just a terrified wife trapped in a web of deceit. The district attorney decided to focus on Marcus, the one who signed the checks and the titles and granted Tiffany a temporary reprieve pending further investigation. She thought she had won. She thought she was Teflon. Nothing stuck to her. She walked out of that precinct wearing the same torn silk dress she was arrested in, looking like a fallen angel who was already plotting her ascent back to heaven. She called an Uber using a credit card that I had not canceled yet, purely to see where she would go. She didn't go to a hotel. She didn't go to her mother's trailer in the next county. She came back here. I watched her arrival from the balcony of my master bedroom holding a pair of binoculars. The black sedan pulled up to the front gate. The driver hesitated, seeing the closed iron bars. Tiffany leaned forward, shouting at him to drive through. She punched the code into the keypad on the brick pillar. The code was her birthday. Access denied. The red light blinked, mocking her. She tried again, faster this time, breaking a nail on the plastic keys. Access denied. She screamed, banging on the side of the car, forcing the driver to reverse. She made him drop her off right there on the curb outside the sanctuary she thought she owned. She slammed the car door and marched up the driveway, her high heels clicking on the asphalt, a staccato rhythm of entitlement. She walked up to the front door, the massive oak slabs that had welcomed senators and CEOs. She reached into her purse, digging for her key, the key that Marcus had given her. The key to the kingdom. She slid it into the lock. It didn't turn. I had the locksmith out here 3 hours after the police took them away. We didn't just rekey the locks. We changed the entire mechanism, upgrading to a biometric system that only responded to my fingerprint. And Harrison's Tiffany rattled the handle. She threw her shoulder against the wood. She pounded on the door with her fists, screaming my name. Desmond, open this door. I live here. I have rights. You can't lock me out. I am your daughter-in-law. I stepped out onto the balcony, looking down at her like a gargoyle perched on a cathedral. She looked up, shielding her eyes against the sun. She saw me. Desmond, she shouted, putting on her best smile, a rictus of desperation. Oh, thank God you are okay. Listen to me. Marcus is crazy. He lied to both of us. I just got out. I need to come in and shower. I need to get my things. We can talk about this. I can explain everything. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my son's mind against me, who had plotted to put me in a home and sell my life's work. She looked small from up here, insignificant. You don't live here, Tiffany, I said, my voice carrying easily in the quiet afternoon air. Yes, I do, she yelled. I have mail sent here. I have residency. You have to let me in, or I will call the police again. I will sue you for illegal eviction. I leaned on the railing, enjoying the view. You can try, I said, but I think you will find that the lease agreement Marcus signed was terminated the moment he was arrested for using the property to facilitate a felony. And as for you, you are a guest who has overstayed her welcome by about 3 years. But my stuff, she shrieked. My clothes, my jewelry, my life is in there. I pointed to the curb down by the main gate. Your life is over there, I said. She turned and looked. Sitting on the grass near the road was a pile. It wasn't luggage. It wasn't the Louis Vuitton set she coveted. It was a mountain of black heavy-duty trash bags tied shut with yellow nylon rope. Next to them were 3 cardboard boxes already soggy from the morning dew. I had the housekeeper pack your things, I said. We were very thorough. We packed everything you bought with your own money before you met Marcus, which I believe amounts to some polyester blends and a pair of knockoff boots. Everything else, everything bought with the King family money stays here. It is evidence in the fraud investigation. Tiffany ran down the driveway, stumbling in her heels. She ripped open the first bag, pulling out a handful of cheap t-shirts and old jeans. She ripped open a box, finding her old high school yearbooks and a hairdryer with a frayed cord. "Where is my Chanel?" she screamed, looking up at me. "Where are my furs?" "Asset forfeiture," I called down. "The forensic accountant seized them this morning. They are property of the estate pending the restitution hearing." "You old bastard," she screamed, throwing a shoe at the house. It fell short, landing harmlessly in the rose bushes. "I will kill you, I will. Burn this house down." I didn't answer. I just watched. She was frantic now. She pulled out her phone, dialing furiously. I knew who she was calling. She was calling Ray, the boyfriend, the backup plan, the man she had been funding with my money. I waited. 10 minutes later, a car roared up the street. It wasn't a luxury sedan. It was a beat-up muscle car with a primer gray paint job and a muffler that sounded like a dying lawnmower. It screeched to a halt outside the gate. Tiffany's face lit up. She grabbed 2 of the trash bags and ran toward the gate, expecting salvation. "Ray," she shouted, waving her arms. "Ray, baby over here." The window of the car rolled down. Ray sat in the driver's seat wearing sunglasses and a look of absolute boredom. He didn't unlock the doors. He didn't pop the trunk. He just sat there, revving the engine. Tiffany reached for the door handle. It was locked. "Ray, let me in," she said frantically. "Open the door. We have to go." The old man locked me out. "We need to get to your place, Ray." Looked at her. Then he looked up at me on the balcony. He didn't look intimidated. He looked annoyed. "I ain't opening nothing, Tiff," Ray said, his voice drifting up to me. "What?" Tiffany froze. What do you mean, Ray? We had a plan. We are going to Miami. Plans changed, babe, Ray said. He held up a newspaper. It was the Chicago Tribune. The headline was bold and black. Prominent. Architect exposes family fraud. Ring socialite daughter-in-law implicated in elder abuse scam. I had Harrison call his contacts at the paper immediately after the arrest. We gave them everything. The photos, the videos, the recordings. We controlled the narrative before Tiffany could spin it. Everyone knows Tiff, Ray said, tossing the paper onto the passenger seat. It is all over the internet. You are toxic, babe. The cops are looking into the money you gave me. They froze my accounts this morning, saying it was proceeds of crime. I got nothing thanks to you. But I didn't know. Tiffany pleaded, reaching through the open window trying to touch him. Ray, I love you. We can fix this. I can get more money. You got nothing, Ray spat. You are broke and you are hot. The cops are going to be watching you like a hawk. I can't have that heat around me. I am on parole. He put the car in gear. Ray, don't leave me, Tiffany screamed, grabbing the side mirror. Ray, please, I have nowhere to go. Ray laughed, a cruel sound that matched hers. Go find another old man to scam, Ray said. He slammed on the gas. The car peeled out, tires smoking, forcing Tiffany to jump back to avoid being run over. She fell onto the grass, her dress tearing at the knee. Ray, she screamed, chasing the car for a few steps. Ray, come back! But the gray car disappeared around the bend, leaving only a cloud of exhaust and silence. Tiffany stood in the middle of the road, alone. She was surrounded by trash bags of old clothes, holding a phone that was blowing up with notifications from social media people tagging her, calling her a gold digger, a thief, a monster. She looked up at the balcony one last time, hoping for mercy, hoping I would relent. Desmond, please, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. I have no money. I have no friends. I am hungry. Let me in. Just for tonight. I looked at her. I saw the girl who had mocked my shaking hands. I saw the woman who had plotted to drug me. I saw the parasite who had fed on my son until he was a husk. I turned and walked back into the bedroom. I picked up the remote control for the gate. I pressed the button. The heavy iron gates began to close slowly, silently shutting out the world, shutting out the trash. No! Tiffany screamed, running toward the gap. No! Don't close it! The gates clanged shut. The electronic lock engaged with a final metallic thud. Click. I walked to the nightstand and picked up my phone. I dialed the guardhouse at the entrance of the subdivision. This is Desmond King, I said. Yes. Mr. King, the guard answered. There is a woman loitering outside my gate. She is creating a disturbance and littering. Can you please have her removed, right? Away, sir, the guard said. I hung up. I walked back to the window, but I didn't step out. I watched through the glass. A security patrol car pulled up, lights flashing. The guard stepped out, speaking to Tiffany, pointing at the bags, telling her to move along. She argued for a moment, pointing at the house, screaming about her rights. But then the guard put his hand on his radio and she stopped. She grabbed 2 of the trash bags, dragging them across the pavement. She left the boxes. She started walking down the long road toward the bus stop a mile away. Her heels were broken. Her dress was torn and her head was hung low. She was walking into a future where no one would trust her, where her name was synonymous with greed, where she would have to work for every dime she ever made. I closed the curtains, shutting out the afternoon sun. The house was quiet. The pest control was complete. I sat down on the edge of my bed and took a deep breath. It was done. The cancer was cut out. Now I just had to learn how to live in the empty space it left behind. The engine of the real Shelby GT500 does not purr. It roars. It is a deep, guttural sound that vibrates through the floorboards and travels straight up your spine, reminding you that you are sitting on top of 428 cubic inches of American history. The car is silver, a bright metallic flake that catches the sun with dual black racing stripes running from the hood to the trunk. It is not a replica. It is not a toy. It is the real. Eleanor. The car I bought 30 years ago. The car I hid away when I realized my family only saw it as a price tag. I shifted into third gear, letting the revs climb, listening to the mechanical symphony of the exhaust. It has been 6 months since the trial. 6 months since the judge banged her gavel and ended the chapter of my life titled Betrayal. Today the air was crisp and clean, smelling of autumn leaves and gasoline. It was a good day to be alive. I was not driving to the country club. I was not driving to a board meeting. I was driving south, away from the manicured lawns of my estate and toward the grittier streets of the city where I grew up. I pulled up to a large brick warehouse on 35th Street. The windows were barred, but the door was open, freshly painted, a bright, welcoming blue. Above the entrance, a modest sign read, "The King Youth Automotive Center." This was my new project. This was where my money was going now. I parked the Shelby in the center of the bay, right on the concrete floor. I turned off the ignition, and the silence that followed was heavy with anticipation. I stepped out, not leaning on a cane. I did not need the cane anymore. The doctor was right about one thing: stress kills. But once you remove the stress, the body has a remarkable way of healing itself. I was wearing blue coveralls with my name stitched over the pocket. Desmond, just Desmond. No CEO, no architect. Just a man who knows how to use a wrench. 12 boys were waiting for me. They ranged in age from 15 to 18, kids who had fallen through the cracks. Kids who had been told they were trouble kids who reminded me of myself before I found architecture. They stood in a semicircle looking at the car with wide eyes, mouths hanging open. They had seen Ferraris in music videos, but they had never seen a machine like this up close. They could smell the unburnt fuel and the hot oil. They could feel the heat radiating from the hood. "All right, gentlemen," I said, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Gather round." They shuffled closer, hesitant, afraid to touch. "This is a 1967 Shelby GT 500, I said, running my hand along the fender. "It is worth more than this building. It is worth more than most houses. But do you know why it is valuable?" A tall boy in the back raised his hand. His name was Andre. He was 17, sharp as a tack but angry. He had a chip on his shoulder the size of an engine block. "Because it is fast," Andre said. "Because it looks cool," I smiled, shaking my head. "No, Andre. It is valuable because it is honest." I popped the hood. The hinges creaked smoothly, revealing the massive V8 engine inside. "Look at this," I said, pointing to the block. "There is no plastic cover here hiding the messy parts. There is no computer chip telling it what to do. It is just steel, iron, and fire. It works because every part does its job without complaining. It works because the foundation is solid." I walked over to a stripped-down chassis we had been working on for the last month. It was an old Mustang, a rust bucket I had bought from a junkyard. We were restoring it from the ground up. I picked up a heavy torque wrench and handed it to Andre Titan. "The suspension bolt," I said. Andre grabbed the wrench. He was strong, eager to prove himself. He jammed the socket onto the bolt and started to crank on it using all his upper body strength, forcing it to turn. "Easy," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Stop." Andre looked at me defensive. "What?" "I am tightening it." "You are forcing it," I said quietly. "You are fighting the metal, son. If you fight the metal wins. You will strip the threads and then the bolt is useless." I took the wrench from him. I loosened the bolt, then gently lined it up. "You have to feel it," I said, turning it slowly, letting the threads catch naturally. "You have to respect the material. When it is right, it goes in smooth. When it is wrong, it fights you." I looked at the group of boys. "Cars are like people," I said, looking them in the eye. "You can put a fancy paint job on a wreck. You can put expensive rims on a car with a cracked frame. You can make it look good on the outside for a little while. But the first time you hit a bump, the first time life puts some pressure on you, that paint is going to crack. And if the frame is not solid, the whole thing collapses." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I had a son once," I said, my voice dropping low. The boys went quiet. They knew I lived alone. They didn't know the story. "He had the best paint job money could buy," I continued. "He went to the best schools, wore the best clothes, drove the fastest cars. But I made a mistake, gentlemen. I focused on the polish and I forgot to build the frame. I looked at the rusted chassis of the Mustang. He looked good on the outside," I said, "but inside he was hollow. He didn't have the steel. He didn't have the integrity. And when the pressure came, he folded." I thought about the news I had received yesterday from Harrison. Marcus had pleaded guilty. It was a plea deal to avoid the maximum sentence of 25 years. He got 5 years in state prison for wire fraud and attempted elder abuse. 5 years behind bars, surrounded by men who would not care about his silk suits or his last name. He was working in the laundry, earning 12 cents an hour, washing the stains out of other men's clothes. And Tiffany, I had heard about her too. My private investigator kept tabs, not because I was obsessed, but because I was thorough. She was working at a diner off the interstate in Indiana, a place where truckers stopped for coffee and pie. She was wearing a uniform with a name tag that said Tiff, living in a motel room trying to find another Mark. But her face was all over the internet. The articles about the trial, the videos of her betrayal, they were permanent digital tattoos that no laser could remove. She was serving tables instead of being served, and for the first time in her life she was earning an honest living. I looked back at Andre. "You boys," I said, "you have a chance to build your frame right here, right now. It does not matter where you come from. It does not matter if your paint is chipped or if you have some rust on your fenders. What matters is what is underneath." I tapped the steel chassis with my knuckle, a solid ringing sound. "Integrity," I said. "Honesty, hard work. That is your engine. That is what powers you down the road. And if you have that, nobody can take it away from you. Nobody can repo it. Nobody can foreclose on it." Andre looked at the wrench in his hand. He looked at the bolt. He took a deep breath. He lined up the socket again. This time he went slow. He felt the thread catch. He turned it smoothly. Click, 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 until the torque wrench snapped, signaling it was perfect. He looked up at me, a smile breaking through his tough exterior. "It felt right that time." Andre said. I patted him on the back, getting a smudge of grease on my coveralls. "Good job, son," I said. "That is how you build something that lasts." We spent the rest of the afternoon working. The shop was filled with the sounds of air tools, the clang of metal, the laughter of young men finding a purpose. We were not just fixing cars, we were fixing futures. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows through the warehouse windows, I wiped my hands on a rag. "Time to pack up, gentlemen," I called out. The boys started cleaning up, putting tools back in their designated spots, sweeping the floor. They moved with a discipline they didn't have 6 months ago. They moved with pride. I walked outside to the Shelby, leaning against the warm metal of the fender. I watched. The boys leave, walking in groups, talking about carburetors and gear ratios. Andre stopped by my car. "Thanks, Mr. Desmond," he said, looking at his shoes. "For what, Andre?" "For not giving up on us," he said. "For showing us how to fix things." I looked at him, and for a second, I saw the ghost of the son I wished I had. The son I could have had if I had been a teacher instead of just a provider. "See you tomorrow." "Andre," I said. "Don't be late." "I won't," he said, smiling. Then he ran to catch up with his friends. I got into the Shelby and turned the key. The engine roared to life, a beast waking from a nap. I pulled out of the lot, driving slowly through the streets of the South Side. I passed the corner stores and the playgrounds, places that used to look hopeless to me but now looked like opportunities. I thought about Marcus sitting in his cell. I hoped he was learning. I hoped the hard labor was forging some kind of character in him. But that was out of my hands now. I had given him the ultimate gift. Consequences of his own actions. I shifted gears, merging onto the highway, heading back toward the lake. I was 72 years old. I had lost my family, but I had found a new one. I had traded a mansion full of lies for a garage full of truth. I pressed the gas pedal. The Shelby surged forward, pinning me back in the seat. The wind rushed through the open window, cooling my face. "I am not done yet," I whispered to the engine. "I am just getting started." The garage was silent, except for the soft, rhythmic squeak of the chamois cloth moving against the metal. It was a Sunday evening, the kind of golden hour where the light hangs suspended in the air, turning dust motes into diamonds. I was alone in the estate now. The house above me was empty. The staff had gone home for the weekend. The party guests were gone. The police were gone. The noise was finally gone. I stood next to Eleanor, my 1967 Shelby GT 500. The real one. The one I had retrieved from the storage unit in Arizona 3 days ago. She gleamed under the fluorescent lights, her silver paint looking like liquid mercury, the black racing stripes cutting down the center like a highway to the horizon. She was beautiful. She was perfect. And she was mine. I sprayed a fine mist of wax onto the rear fender, wiping it down with slow, deliberate circles, wax on, wax off. It was a meditation, a way to clean the slate. I could see my reflection in the chrome bumper, a distorted image of an old, Man with white hair and a face etched with the lines of a hard year, but the eyes looking back at me were clear. They were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a survivor. I moved to the passenger side. The door was open, revealing the pristine black leather interior. The smell of the car hit me, that heady mix of old leather, gasoline, and nostalgia. It smelled like freedom. It smelled like the days before I had money, the days when I just had ambition and a full tank of gas. I stopped polishing. My hand rested on the open door frame. I looked at the empty passenger seat. It was untouched. The leather was smooth, unmarred by the weight of a passenger. I felt a sudden sharp pang in my chest. It wasn't my heart. It was my memory. I saw her there. Catherine. I saw her sitting in that seat, laughing, her hair tied back in a silk scarf, the wind whipping around her face. She used to love this car almost as much as I did. She used to yell at me to go faster, to pass the trucks, to feel the engine roar. She was the fire to my steel, the risk to my calculation. I closed my eyes, and for a second I could hear her voice echoing off the concrete walls of the garage. Desmond, you are spoiling him. The memory was 30 years old, but it felt like yesterday. We were standing in the kitchen of our first house, arguing about a bicycle. Marcus wanted the most expensive one in the store, the one with the shocks and the gears. He was 6 years old. He is just a boy, Catherine, I had said. I want him to have the best. He needs to earn the best. Desmond, Catherine had replied, her eyes flashing, warning me. She had seen the future. I was too blind to see. She had seen the entitlement taking root, the rot setting in. If you give him everything now, he will appreciate nothing later, she had said. I opened my eyes, looking at the empty seat. You were right, Catherine, I whispered into the silence. My voice sounded loud in the empty garage, startling me. I walked around to the front of the car, running my hand over the Shelby emblem on the grille. You were right about everything I said, talking to the ghost of the woman I loved. I thought I was being a good father. I thought providing for him was the same as raising him. I gave him the car, I gave him the tuition, I gave him the safety net. And every time I handed him a check, I was cutting his hamstrings. I was crippling him with comfort. I picked up the wax bottle and set it on the workbench, carefully lining it up with the others. I am an architect. I like order. I like straight lines. But my life had been a crooked mess for so long, I walked back to the car. I tried to fix it. Cat, I said, leaning against the door frame. I tried to undo 30 years of mistakes in 30 days. I had to break him to save him. I had to send our son to prison. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Prison. The word didn't fit with the life we had planned. We wanted him to be a doctor, a lawyer, an architect. We didn't want him to be inmate 7429. But maybe that was the only title he ever truly earned. I looked up at the ceiling where the automatic door opener hung silent and waiting. He hates me now, I said softly. He sits in that cell and he curses my name. He thinks I am the villain, and maybe I am. Maybe a father who sends his son to jail is a monster. But I couldn't let him become you. Cat, I couldn't let him destroy everything we built. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and fast. I didn't wipe it away. I let it fall, landing on the concrete floor, joining the oil stains and the dust. It is quiet here now, I whispered. It is so quiet. The house is too big for one man, the echoing hallways, the empty bedrooms. It is just me and the memories. I felt the weight of the loneliness. It was a physical thing, a heavy coat I couldn't take off. This was the price. The cost of the war. I had won the battle. I had saved the estate. I had protected the legacy. But I had lost the family. Was it worth it? I looked at the car. I looked at the shine on the fender. I looked at the strength of the steel. Yes, I said, because dignity is worth it, because truth is worth it. I am 73 years old today. It is my birthday. No one called Marcus, didn't call Tiffany, certainly didn't call Harrison. Sent a bottle of scotch, but that was it. Just me and the silence. But I am not dead yet. I straightened my back. I wiped the tear from my cheek. I adjusted the collar of my coveralls. I am Desmond King, I said aloud, getting my voice back. I built the skyline of this city. I survived Vietnam. I survived the death of my wife, and I survived the betrayal of my son. I am not going to spend my birthday crying in a garage. I opened the driver's side door and slid into the seat. The bucket seat hugged me, familiar and tight. It felt like a handshake from an old friend. I gripped the wooden steering wheel, feeling the grain under my palms. I put the key in the ignition. I didn't turn it yet. I looked at the passenger seat one last time. "Goodbye, Catherine," I whispered. "Thank you for watching over me. And don't worry about Marcus. He is in good hands, the hands of the state, but good hands nonetheless." I turned the key. The engine exploded to life. It wasn't a purr, it was a roar, a guttural, primal scream of horsepower and gasoline. The garage vibrated. The sound bounced off the walls, shaking the dust from the rafters. It was the sound of a lion waking up. It was the sound of life. I revved the engine, feeling the power travel through the chassis into my bones. It woke up my heart. It made the blood pump faster in my veins. I reached up and pressed the button for the garage door. The heavy cedar door rolled up slowly, revealing the world outside. The sun was setting, a magnificent ball of fire dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The light flooded into the garage, chasing away the shadows, chasing away the ghosts. I put the car in gear. The shifter clicked into place, mechanical and precise. I let out the clutch. The car surged forward, inching out into the light. Drove down the long driveway, past the manicured lawns, past the fountain, past the gate that had kept Tiffany out. I turned onto the main road. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the empty windows. I pressed the gas pedal. The Shelby leaped forward, pushing me back into the seat. The wind rushed through the open windows, cooling my face, drying the last of the tears. The engine howled a symphony of American muscle. I drove toward the sunset, toward the city, toward the future. I am 73 years old. I have a full tank of gas. I have a road that goes on forever. And for the first time in a long time I am driving. My life is not over. It is just beginning again. Moral lesson. A car is just metal and rubber, but betrayal leaves a rust that never buffs out. I spent my life building skyscrapers, but I failed to build a foundation for my own son. We think providing luxury is love, but often it is just poison wrapped in silk. If your children only respect you when your wallet is open, you haven't raised children, you have raised parasites. Do not fear cutting off the branch to save the tree. Protect your legacy, protect your dignity, and never let anyone drive your life, especially not from the passenger seat. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share more stories like this with the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss a beat. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to make a hard choice to save someone you love? I read every single one. Until next time, keep your eyes on the road and your hands on the wheel. Stay safe.